Welcome, everybody, to the second qualifier of the Women's Speed Chess Championship. Today is a slightly different format than yesterday. Yesterday, there were 5 minutes plus 1 second increment over 9 rounds to see who qualified for the knockout, top 8 players. Today, it is 3 minutes plus a 1 second increment. So, a different time format, but still, it's going to be a great day ahead. And we are about to have liftoff in all of, at this point, 15 seconds from now. So, it's going to be another excellent day of speed chess action. I'm just watching Jan Nepomniachtchi and Alexander Shamanov play, just the game that I have up here, but in just 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1, we have liftoff. The second qualifier for the Women's Speed Chess Championship is now officially underway. We have Valentina Gunina. She is the top seed. She's playing with the black pieces in this game. She played yesterday as well. So let's go through some of these games. It's going to be quicker pace, so I'm going to try to keep up with all the action. Let's start with Gunina. Why not? She is the top seed. Let's look here with the black pieces. She played the Caro-Kann, bishop on g4. So f3 is one of these committal moves where some of the dark squares can be weaker later in the game, but she has this down pat. A lot of the top Russian female players, they play the Caro-Kann, and so here she takes the knight e5, walking into this pin, but there's also possibilities of discovery. If this knight were to move away from e2 at some point, this queen and bishop, the knight is still allowed to move. So bishop to d6 will come. The queen and the bishop will line up against the bishop on f4. And again, note that if you castle kingside, there are moments where queen b6 will be check on your king, and the pawn on b2 will be in trouble. So that's one of the downsides of playing a move like f3 so early, is it is quite risky. And we see a castle. I don't think we'll see queen to b6. Doesn't make sense just yet. Look at this nice development from black here. Everything feels safe and sound. I know there's an isolated pawn, which will worry some people. Having an isolated pawn is risky because a pawn's best friend is another pawn. So you would prefer to have this kind of structure where the pawn c3 is well defended for the rest of the game because of this pawn on b2. But this pawn on d5 requires the defense of the knight on f6, which means that a timely bishop g5 or something like that could remove the guard of this pawn on d5. And knight d4, blockading the pawn is an important technique. This knight can also go out to the f5 square, the bishop on c2, staring at the black king. So far, I like white's position. I think it's pretty good. But you have to figure out exactly what to do. Knight a3, good development move, but what about bishop takes knight? Wasn't that just a possibility? I understand this bishop is helping block a pin, but this ruins white's pawn structure over there on the queen side. So I think you just take this thing. Take that one, and then take this pawn on c3. That looks very good. Oh, I realized I had the evaluation bar off, but it's back on. I'm so used to doing commentary without the evaluation bar on, but here, just for everybody. Bishop takes a3. Black is doing very well here. Just capture, capture, go up a pawn. Let's keep on going down the list. We'll come back to this game as it likely will continue until the final stretch here, but Gunina up on time, up in position. I like her chances. We have this game here between Lile Koridze with the black pieces, and this is Harika Dronavalia with the white pieces. Knight on e4, pawn e5, bishop on f4. This is a very good configuration in the sense that if you can get this knight to d6, you are making some clear progress. The queen and the rook aim at the c6 pawn. Black doing the same thing, protecting that pawn here. And at some moment, knight takes f4 will be possible. But for now, black is refraining because if you take on f4, you know that this bishop on e7 isn't really an advantageous piece. You take to get the bishop pair, you think that's to your advantage, but what is this bishop on e7 doing? It's actually stuck. It has no good diagonal to work with, so that's why white is waiting for this capture on f4, that which reinforces this pawn e5 as well. And here is the capture. It's going to be a recapture. This is a relatively unique pawn structure, but one that is very sturdy. I think you should move this knight because this rook on d5 is trying to allow a doubling on the rooks. There the knight moves out the way. The rook is under attack. Also, without the knight here, f5 becomes possible because the queen protects the square. And these double pawns, you may want to start mobilizing those things. Alrighty, so we have a capture here, rook to d8. All the trades happening, but this is not something you see every day with these pawns, but very safe and sound. So they limit the scope of this bishop on e7. Talking about the bishop pair, Two bishops advantage. Not a big advantage here. This bishop on e7, nowhere useful to go. If you go to c5, what? You're staring at this pawn chain here. Not helpful. Bishop to h4. It's a safe square. You're putting a little bit of pressure on this pawn at f2, but not much. So I think that white's position is actually quite sturdy here. And this pawn at c6, if you can pile up or force this move c5, then the bishop on e7 gets worse and the light squares become vulnerable. So if black has to make this move, for example, we go bishop e2 at some point, try to trade the bishops, because if we ever get all these things off, watch out for the light square control for white. So we have c5, we have knight e4, king g2, and now this knight's definitely moving. You don't want to give up this knight for this bishop. You'd rather trade the bishops off. Queen e2. I guess she didn't want her king to have to take on f3, but it was a possibility to try to trade him off. I think I would try to take on e4. I don't want to be stuck with this bishop. I really don't. But let's keep on going down the list of games here. We have Vaishali once again playing here, and with the black pieces, she's up in exchange. So off to a good start. She's a very strong player from India. A young, talented player, nearly 2,400 FIDE in classical chess, and she's looking to leave her mark on the second qualifier. Here we have Grandmaster Stefanova with the white pieces. She's taking on Sabina Feuscher, so the 2017 U.S. Women's Champion. This knight came back to e3 to protect this pawn g4, but this pawn a4, it seems like we just have even material for now, but that's the most dangerous piece on the board. If this knight can dislodge this rook and get a knight d4, knight b5, something like that very quickly, then this pawn can be dangerous. So she puts the knight on c5 so she can move her rook. The knight protects the pawn here. But she only has 5.6 seconds left, so it's going to be difficult for her in the time trouble. But white doesn't have any sort of initiative. That's the thing. If you're going to try to flag your opponent, meaning win on time, you want to actually create some threats. But here it's black is the one with all the threats, because this pawn on a4 is very strong. If you trade rooks, you're not going to win this game. Oh, the capture happened. Wait, two. Oh my gosh, she was not expecting the rook trade. Oh, 1.1. She made that move with 0.1 seconds left. That's a good move, because now she can play b2. Play b2. Play knight c3. Get a queen. Okay, pre-move queen. Pre-move that. Unless white goes g6, in which case pre-moving that is really bad. So g6 is what I would play for Stefanova, because 1.6 seconds left. Just play g6. A draw by agreement. Oh my gosh, no! Ban the draw offer. Ban the draw offer. So I would play g6, because if you're pre-moving getting a queen, then when I take and you take back, I take on h7 and get a queen. So g6 would have been super tricky to meet with 1.6 seconds left. But after g6, black takes, and then gets a queen, for instance, and the king eventually ends up on f6, black is winning this endgame. So the draw offer probably smart by, I don't know who offered it, but if it was Sabina Feuscher with the black pieces, I get why. No time left. But if I were Stefanova, I would try to flag my opponent with pawn to g6. So probably a missed opportunity in a sense, but it's a long tournament, 13 rounds. This isn't going to be make or break. Let's go back to this game here. Harika Jonavali now is down 2 pawns against Lile Koridze. So this is going to be an upset here in the very first game, because with these 2 pawns, a5, f. So the one thing you can't have happen is be left with this configuration of pawn and bishop, because the h1 square is a light square. So if white were able to get rid of this f5 pawn, you just have to sacrifice the knight for this pawn, and then it's immediately going to be a draw. But now with the pawn split like this, no, you can't do it all. So this is good, decision first, but you'll see the black king come here. Oh, knight c4? The king is too close. The king has cut everything off, so f3, f2, and this king is very far away. So it's just, yeah, you see the evaluation bar drops, and black is winning. King g2, and now the h-pawn is escorted up the board. Black wins. So an upset in the first game, still a very long tournament. These things will happen, and people will be able to bounce back. We have Mungsul Turmunk. She wins the game with black here. She's up a queen, so that makes sense. Oh, f2 check. That's winning. That is winning. f2 check. The point is that the king and rook here, you have to take, but even if the rook were somewhere else on the first rank, if this, let's say that rook did not come to f1, and the rook stayed over here. So e3 was played. Oh gosh, you have to check here. It's blitz. You make mistakes, but you have to check the king off, because once the king goes back, then you can take this pawn. And the point is, this king doesn't get to this very important g3 square. So if you take, my king comes to f2, I'm blockading your pawn. White would make a draw. But by taking here, king g3, and you're lost, because this rook e1 mate, if the rook leaves the first rank, and with what happened in the game, it doesn't really matter, because you can give this check, and then you go here, threatening mate again. And if you don't want to lose your rook, you bring your king here, f2, king f1, rook h1. Thank you very much for your rook. It was nice to play. So black is winning at this point because of, unfortunately, taking on e3 right away loses, and we are off to the second round. So let's get this party started. So we have Valentina Gunina is taking on Tokyo Yunova, I believe. Unless, well, I can actually just open this here. No, it's Sophie Moore Suzuki. Okay, I forgot the usernames. But Sophie Moore Suzuki, young player from the United States. She will try to hold off her much more highly rated opponent, and she's playing the solid setup against the Constantine. So d6, e6, b6, a6. Very standard here. You put your bishop on b7, put your knight on d7, importantly. And this leaves the bishop open for pressure on the center. And white is going to go rook c1 at some moment. So if you put a knight on c6 and a rook on c1, there are all these threats for knight to d5. Just to show that very quickly. So knight to d7. Let's say you play knight c6, rook c1, castle. You always have to watch out for knight to d5, because if e takes, c takes, the rook is in the same line as his queen, which means the knight is pinned, or otherwise you lose your queen. So that's why the knight goes to d7. Now Gunina is thinking here. Their ideas with f5, their ideas with e5. This knight can come to c5 to put pressure on d3 and on e4. That's why b4 was chosen by Gunina, to stop the knight from getting there. Anytime you go a5, you loosen control of the b5 square, so my knight will just jump into the action. So it is tough for black to play these, because you have a very solid pawn structure, but your pieces lack space. And that's the big problem when you're facing 4 pawns on your opponent's 4th rank here, is that your pieces get limited, right? The control over d5, over c5, over e5, f5, these pawns are doing a great job. But if black can get d5, that's really the key. If black can play d5 and there's no problem with it, typically black is doing just fine. But here, with the c file opening up, you're not getting d5 in very easily. So let's keep on going. We'll come back to this one, I think. I said that last time we didn't come back to it. I have to remember, it's a 3-minute contest per side with a 1-second increment. This time, yesterday was 5 minutes plus 1-second increment. And the reason that happens is because in these Speeches Championship formats, you play 5 plus 1, 3 plus 1, and 1 plus 1. That's 5 minutes with 1-second increment, 3 minutes with 1-second increment, 1 minute with 1-second increment. And you play a certain amount of time in those time controls. So you have to be good at the 5-minute. You have to be good at the 3-minute. You have to be good at the bullet in order to defeat your opponent. And that's why these qualifiers have these different time controls, and are, on different days. If people are busy on one day, they still have a chance to qualify. The top 2 at the end of this will make it on. There'll be 8 players qualifying for knockout, and the top 2 in the knockout, so essentially the finalists of the knockout, will qualify for the Women's Speeches Championship. So queen and bishop, watch out. This pawn on b6 is now under attack. Does that mean the knight has to go back to d7? Ugh, you don't really want your knight on d7 because you want to play for d5. So d5 is always the idea, but already there's pressure on the side of the board. So I think that white is just slightly better, has this Maroczy bind. It's a bind because your pawns can't really push very easily. My pawns are out here. We'll move on for a moment, go to another game here. Let us go here with white having some attacking chances. The first thing I noticed was this rook on e3. I want to swing this rook to g3 over here and get an attack. So if I'm able to accomplish that, I will be very, very happy. And, well, how am I going to accomplish it? The knight has to move out the way. There goes knight h4, so that's the start of a potential attack. But it does feel a little bit slow in the sense that black has good control over some of the queen side. I would like to put pressure on this square, but I guess after rook g3, you'll have to move this g-pawn right now. And that's a big issue. So I would probably, it looks scary, but move my king to h8, so that once the king's on h8, after rook to g3, I have rook to g8. So I'm just defending without having to commit my pawn anywhere. I don't really like the look of smushing my king in the corner, but I think I like the look of playing with like g5 a lot less. That move would run to f4 ideas, just blasting open my king's position. So I think king h8 is, I don't want to say forced, because king h7 looks wrong to me, just because I'm noting that there will be a check at some moment. I know the square is under control just now, but let's say after the king's on h7, I play a3, bishop a2, bishop e1. It's a long story, but I just for some reason, I always feel vulnerable to such a check. And so I would prefer to stay on h8. It feels a little safer, even if a little more passive. So no move yet. And it is a tough position, but I don't know what else you do besides moving the king, as mentioned. All right, knight f8. That, not bad. So g6, you're just trying to put a pawn on g6 and hold steady here. I'm always looking at f4, f5 ideas, but wait, a4 might trap my bishop. So I have to be careful about that. I'm so focused on the attack that I'm not looking at this bishop having no squares to move to. So maybe I should play a4 as white. And if I play a4, I'm challenging your pawn, and I want you to take me so my bishop gets out. So rook f1 played, trying to get f4, f5, and give the bishop some space on d1. I'm playing a4 here, though, for sure. Like I'm definitely playing a4. Where's this bishop going? I go to e2 to d3. That takes some time. I play queen to d8, and I think queen d8 is a good multi-purpose move. It attacks d4 in the case of f4, and okay, queen on e7 allows f4. The queen on d8 wouldn't have allowed f4, but you still have the same idea of trying to trade on g5 if necessary, right? Getting the queens off the board to stop the attack. So f4 played. It's looking more and more dangerous, and this is now a sort of time scramble. Both players under 45 seconds. Black down to 30, and it's a tough position because you know f5 is coming. You know you don't want to allow f5, but bishop e4, clever, trying to defend this king. In fact, I forgot the bishop could go there because that square was under white's control until that move f4 was played. But good recognition that f4 cuts off the queen from the center. So bishop f3, this queen is looking almost trapped. Almost trapped over here. I guess there is no trap because h5 you take it. The rook pins the pawn. Bishop c2, keeping the defense alive. f5, I just take it. I'm looking at d5, f5. It feels too ambitious, though. Feels too ambitious. So f5. At a certain point, when you're under 20 seconds left, even if it's not the right move, you just have to go. So I think f5 is the move you have to play. Rook h3 feels a little bit too tame. This pawn b3. So rook c3 played to trade off the rooks. But I think you just have to go. And now you don't have f5 anymore, at least not so easily, without this rook pinning the pawn. So queen h3, hitting this pawn, trying to go for h6. Knight f3 now. So trying to hit king g7. g4, g5 comes to mind. But it doesn't feel quick enough. It really is queen h4. I think that's a good move. The threat is often strong in the execution. So even if you're not going to deliver a checkmate, you can scare your opponent. Wait, that's a pawn hanging with check. Take that thing here. Take it now. It wins a piece. Such a tough position to play here. Take that, and that's, at least by chess.com blitz rating, this is an upset. That was a nice game. Very back and forth. Let's go back to Gunina. As whoa, what's going on here? She's playing. Wait, this looks really good for white. Okay, the evaluation bar in the time trouble, just swinging up back and forth. But white is clearly crushing. And it's just figuring, oh gosh, there's the rook. The rook on a7 pin. Now it's about to be checkmate as soon as you take. That's mate. Mate on the board. Check and mate. That's a good win for Gunina there. Let's go to Vaishali. Oh. How many extra pawns does white have? Okay, well that's a win. 4 extra pawns, clearly enough. And this is Polina Shuvalova with the black pieces here. And whoa, she is up a lot of material. So, wait, she's not up a lot of material. There's 2 rooks. I thought there was only 1 rook. I totally missed this rook when I first looked in. But black is much better. King h5. I would play king h5. And g4, b2. It's just too good. Too good. Too many pawns. So Irina Bumaga with the black pieces here. Whoa. Okay, so this endgame, you have to take the rook. King f1, king e2. So king d5. Ooh. that looked like a potential missed opportunity there. We'll look at it after, very few seconds left. But it looks like a missed opportunity because the king could have just entered. Let's just go back. There's an instructive king and pawn in the game. After there was this trade on c7 here, so there's all these threats. That's why white took. But this should be a bad ending if you go king d5 and king takes, king c4. You're probably worried about this king going after your pawn over here, but takes, and if I'm not mistaken, black's pawn queens first. So it's this like searching for Bobby Fischer endgame where both sides are trying to queen, but instead of king being on the diagonal, black actually just queens one move ahead. Very hard to calculate when you have no time, but as you see here, this pawn queens first, and no queen for you. So let's keep on looking. We have round 3 underway, where there are many players. I'm looking at the standings real quick. We have too many players tied with 2-0. That's what happens when you have a big turnout. All right, so let's all right. So in this game here, we see that this knight's on f5. The pawn on e6 is pinned, and well, I mean it's gonna be hard for white to continue because I don't see an attack. This bishop on f8 safeguards the position. You can castle queenside. So Gunina feels very comfortable here, it seems, and so not too much to worry about. I think that it's a good position for her. She's comfortable playing these positions with black, and white clearly is taking a lot of time. So what's the idea here? What could she be looking at? Knight to e5. So it looks like a sacrifice for knight, but then you get a discover check, and that would be a problem. So I would probably just move my knight out the way and then go for castling. The reason you can't castle right now is this pawn f7 is hanging. So she takes on e5. But I just, you know, in these Caracons, giving the pawn e5 can be a weakness later in the game. But for the time being, it restricts the scope of black's pieces. Right? The queen on c7, the bishop can't come to d6 because there's a pawn here. And so white just pushes forward. Very smart play here. You can try to even play for f5 or move your knight to e4, play for g4, g5, just expand over here on the king side. So knight e4 looks very good. They're well played. And I think Gunina is going to struggle in this game. This rook can actually slide up to h3 and over to b3. Rook lifts, very powerful. You have a pawn out on h5. It doesn't need the defense of the rook, so the rook isn't actually doing its best job on h1. So swinging up to h3 over to the queen side makes a lot of sense, and so does this move. I always think about king to b1 just to put my king close to the edge of the board when there's so many pieces. Not necessary just yet. c4 is a potentially good move, but also potentially weakening, because then you leave a square like d3. This knight can come to b4. I think it's good for white, but this makes more sense. It's more restrained, bringing the rook to the queen side. So I'm going to keep looking at these games here. We have... Wait, that pawn is hanging, but that may be a trick. Bishop e7, rook e8. Where's this bishop going? So it actually is a trick. If this bishop goes back to h4, I go g5. Thank you for your piece. So h6 played by Charlotte. She knows her, what looks like a Banco gambit, and there's pressure on the queen side on both files. White is up a pawn, so this is typical of a Banco gambit type of position, where white is up a pawn, but black has a lot of pressure. So you're trying to bring the rook to attack this pawn. This rook on a8 is strong. You have this bishop on g7, which is an absolute monster. You see that black's pieces have a lot of space, but the longer white has this extra pawn, if you're able to protect your remaining pawns, in this case these two, now this pawn's at b3, then you start playing in the center e4, f4, try to play for e5, and that's where white can claim an edge. But at some point black is going to consider c4, especially if you ever move this pawn. So knight a4, attacking the queen, closing down the a file for now. This bishop attacks the rook, but white is going to play bishop c3 to challenge that bishop on the long diagonal, and I think that it's totally okay. So this is going to be a position where white is better with the extra material. e4 for sure. You just gain space in the center. You can try to punch through e5. Knight to b2, that's a solid move. That way there's no c4 ideas. You have this knight stopping this pawn from pushing. And so I think that here white is just better. A very simple advantage. Up a pawn, can gain space in the center. Nothing that black can attack. Typically, there are weak squares that you exploit. Here, there are no weak squares. And this knight on f6 is staying here so the bishops don't get traded. But the knight would rather be on a square like e5 eventually. Especially right now. If this knight could get to e5, try to get into the light squares, that'd be good. But if you ever move the knight, then the bishop trade happens, and then black's king starts feeling unsafe. So queen f8 to try to take control of the diagonal. I think e5, though. Push this pawn through. There it is, e5. If you ever take on e5, your pawn c5 becomes weak. If you don't take on e5, I can even consider playing e6. She captures. She has to play rook c8 now because this pawn on c5 is under attack. I play knight c4, just move towards the center. There it is. And now d6 becomes a reality. I was always thinking if I push e5, maybe eventually d6. Now I have two pieces protecting the square. d6 trades the bishops. I don't want to trade the bishops just yet. Rook a to d1 looks principled, just protecting the pawn before advancing it. That's good. And now, do I play knight e3? I think knight e3 is strong. Just keeping the pawn safe on d6 is possible as well. So bishop g2, king takes g2. I don't really want to take on e7 just yet. I'll keep the pressure here in the center. White is up a minute on the clock. Dang, this is a hard position to play. But white is up so much time here. And black is just struggling. Knight to b6. Just kick that rook. The bishop attacks here, so knight to b6 looks pretty strong. And what else can you play? So she plays knight to b6. Now the c5 pawn is under attack. Yeah, I think this is already very problematic. So queen takes c5 actually steals a pawn, protects the knight, attacks this pawn e7. Takes. If queen takes 7, is there knight c8? Oh, knight forks. Knight forks. Is she going to find it, though? Bishop b8 is also very good. I was actually about to say that. The queen's under attack. The rook's under attack. This is a nicely played game. So it is only round 3. This is a 13-round event before the knockout. Oh, nice. Queen a8. Watch out. Oh! Rook d8 check. You have to go rook d8. Good find. That scared me, though, because white's position was so good. You take on a8 here. Now black is right back in this with 3 seconds left. So queen a8 check. f3 was a really poorly timed decision. I understand, you're just trying to block the check, but I guess she forgot that her pawn on a2 was hanging, and now black has a ton of compensation. It is a rook for a bishop. This knight is about to come to h5 once this king moves back to the first rank, and she only has 18 seconds, so she plays it. Knight h5. Watch out. Bishop d4 check. Knight g3 would be mate. So here's bishop d4 pinning this knight. This is now a problem. Don't allow rook takes d4. That's why the rook moved out the way, because if the bishop was captured, the rook would be hanging. g4, knight f4. This pawn is hanging. Knight g2 is a threat in many variations. So she takes. This is turned around so quickly. Knight h3 check. Take that with check. You have to go king h1. If the king went to f1, rook f2 would have been mate. King back to g2, then knight f4 check. So king g2, knight f4. There is a chance to hold this because black is only up 2 pawns. So if white can trade off all the 2 of the pawns and then sacrifice her knight for the remainder, that's good. But look at this. Rook e2. You're going for a mate. King g3, there's rook g2 checkmate. King has to go back d3. The rook can't get to d5. The rook can't get to d5, go d2. Wait, king f. Why not king f1 there? Oh, nice move. Rook has to go to c7. Okay, now you lose the knight, and it's game over. Wow. Under the duress of time trouble and down on the board, Vaishali, she fights back, and now she's just winning. Check and queen, and thank you. I now am up a rook and a knight. That was... I'm going to have to go back to show that one more time because it, of course, was a blunder by white. But just to spot that kind of stuff so quickly, that was very impressive here. And she's just gaining time at this point. Take the pawn, put the rook back. Rook e5. She'll play rook e4 or knight shoot. So this is smart. You can just pre-move the rest of the game because this rook cuts off the king. So let's go back to that moment because that was some crazy stuff here. So here, after queen a8 check, just a simple move king to g1. That way there's no rook takes a2 with pins. f3, rook takes a2. And now the big problem is the only way to stop this is either playing rook d8 check as in the game or bring your knight back. If you bring your knight back here, then I move my knight out the way and open up an attack on the square. So that's why rook d8 check, which is good. Here, takes. And now this king is just in harm's way. So king g1, knight h5, bishop d4 is check with knight g3 to follow it. This is just a tragic position. So well done by Vaishali to survive that. And not just survive it, but to win it. Wasn't expecting that. We have Jennifer Yu here playing, and, well, not just playing, winning this game. Checkmate with 2 extra queens and a knight to boot. So Jennifer Yu wins that one. Good performance by her. And what's happening here? So we have an endgame. Watch out. This could be dangerous for black to some extent, but the bishop will just stay on a1. Put that... Oh! She lost on time! I didn't look at the clock. Caught me off guard. Ah, that's unfortunate. Because just bishop a1. Keep this bishop protecting here. Oh, that's sad. I hate when that happens. It happens to me all the time. And we have Anna Sargsyan playing with the black pieces. Another Grumpy. I like the avatar. Taking Vaishali. So it's a Caro-Kann, Queen f3 line. This is pretty rare to bring the queen out so early. Usually the knight would like to go to f3. But right now, the queen sits on the square. And knight e2. And this knight protects the pawn, but it blocks in the bishop. So it's not the most comfortable thing. But you can play g3, bishop g2, and move this way. And, alright, so far it's early. And, one second, everybody. So h4, this way goes h5, and this way this bishop gets trapped. So, a very interesting opening. You don't see this queen come out so early like this. And the knight came to g3 after the knight came to d7. And h4 to go h5. Okay, this makes sense. So knight f6. h5, there's going to be a massive trade on the e4 square. So I think that h5 is delayed for now. So let's come back to this game. I want to open up as many games as possible because I got so focused on that one game in that last round. And here we see that this pawn's on b4. That feels like a potential target. Eventually queen a4 to take that one. But this a5 pawn, similarly, later in the game, that one can be weak. The difference in these pawns is that white can bring up a rook and attack it. This pawn a5, it's going to take a while before you ever can get a rook here, especially with my pieces staring down the queen side. So I like white's position for sure. I think that another idea is e5, so you can bring this knight to c5. This knight on d7, a knight 3 squares away from a pawn, is dominated by that pawn. This pawn is preventing that knight's forward progress. So if you play e5, that knight finally gets out once this pawn is removed from d4. You can get to c5. So I think that e5 is thematic just to break open the position for your pieces. When you have less space, and black has less space because look at white's center here, you have less space. You want to trade some pieces. So if I'm black, I'm looking to play e5, not just to trade the pawns, but to get my pieces out. And look at these knights, right? This knight has no forward progress, especially now that this has happened. Oh, this looks really tough. I would play h4, knight f1, try to play h5, bring this bishop out to g5, and you can get all this. All this is going to happen because where black's piece is going. This knight on d7 completely dominated by the pawns because white's pawns are very advanced. Where is it going? Knight b8, knight c6. Okay, your knight looks a little more advanced. It's not attacking anything. The rook on a1 is the only thing needed to protect this pawn. The knight on f3 is the only thing needed to protect that pawn. No space. No space. So I think that it's just a tough position from a strategic point to really completely understand. There will be some chances for black. I think you should try to get this knight to b5 because at least you have the threat of knight to c3. So she plays knight b5. You can take on b5, and I would just take once. Don't take this again because if you take again, then this bishop will eventually get to the a6 square. At least I think it will. Or bishop c6, bishop b5, and then black has some room to breathe. It is worse for black to be even on material. So it's essentially keeping your pawn is worse for black because this bishop is entombed by its own pawns. What is bishop a6 now? Staring into your own pawn. What is bishop c6? Staring into your own pawns. This bishop is a bad piece. So taking this pawn on b5 is possible in the sense that you will not get punished by losing any of your pieces, but it will open up your opponent's piece. So leave that pawn there. Do not take it. And don't even pay attention to that side of the board. Like, the queen side is sort of irrelevant for the time being. And actually, she plays rook to c1 to compete for the c file. Maybe it's not completely irrelevant. Now that the rook is here, this pawn perhaps can be captured. But bishop a6, I mean, this is a sad piece. Very sad piece. I want to play g4. I think that white can actually initiate an attack over there on the king side, but I think she's smarter than I am. This pawn is now just lost. And that's a pawn you want to take because it doesn't open up any of black's pieces. So knight c2 is very smart. I was so focused on a potential kingside attack that I didn't think about this b4 pawn, but if you need to add more pressure, you could always play queen to e1. Now you can just take this thing and take with a rook. because the knight comes to c6. Ouch. a6 now. I play a6 so I don't have to worry about the pawn. And then I play knight to g5. Oh, wow. Now the pawn is really hanging. So why even play 6? Queen a4. Tuck the queen right back here. She's probably thinking about knight c6 if that's possible. It is. But I like queen a4, keeping everything safe and sound. And black still, despite some of the opening on the queen side, the opening came at the cost of 2 pawns, so black is in big trouble. I guess you couldn't take this pawn ever. The bishop would have just discovered attack on the queen. So play b4. You can trade rooks, bring this knight to c5. So she does in this move order. And yeah, this is unfortunately for black. Never got her pieces in the game. It was too easy for white to play. And this is going to be a victory for Polina Shuvalova, the flawless fighter. Let us go to another game. I mean, black has so little time and has a tough position. So let's move on here to Vaishali, who is taking on another grumpy. It's Anna Sargsyan. So this rook situation for white doesn't attack anything. This is a brick wall on e6. Unfortunately for white, there is actually attack on b2. This bishop on h7 is surprisingly good. It's back over there on near the king, but it takes control of the whole diagonal. And after rook g5, well, what's white going to do? You move the knight, you lose the pawn. So I'd probably... Wow, b4, hitting the queen. I wasn't thinking about that side of the board, but that's probably a decent move. It frees up this rook. So instead of being a purely passive piece protecting b2, the downside is this pawn on c3 is now a potential weakness. But it's hard to pile up on that pawn because white has more space with the pawns. Her pawns are doing great work. Queen f4, watch out. Wait, that's a pawn, but that's a pawn too. f5 was probably not correct. I think that f5 was not correct. It makes this bishop look bad. It also makes this pawn e6 very vulnerable. And so you may take on c3, but rook takes e6, queen takes a3. Perhaps you're stealing enough pawns in the process to make it worth it. But I'm looking at rook e8. Isn't black's king about to get in some big trouble? Queen d6, rook e8. Oh, d5, nice move. Connecting this pawn because the queen would have loved to come back in the game. Now this king is about to be under a blistering attack. The bishop can't move here. d5 was excellent. That was a really good move by Vaishali, and I think she's just winning this game now because rook takes e8, queen... Oh, there's got to be a checkmate in a couple moves here. Queen e5, queen e6. Can't stop that checkmate. Queen e6 is mate. Wow. Won by resignation before she could deliver the checkmate, but that's checkmate on the board. d5 deserves some serious praise here because it opens the queen's defense to this pawn while sacrificing a pawn in the center. But the whole point is to go after this king. The rook is stuck. The bishop is stuck. All you have is this one defender. And if you played rook e8 right away, queen takes b4. Now at least you have a second defender. It should still be good for white. A move like queen to b8 to put more pressure on this rook on f8. But I really like this move d5, understanding that black has just one piece to the defense of her king, and now it's just going to be a quick attack. Really well done. Props to Vaishali. She's playing very well today. And, I mean, she was suffering in game 3, but she won that game anyway. So what's happening here? We have an endgame of 2 pawns for black. That is Nana Zagnidze, I believe, with the black pieces. Incredibly strong Georgian Grandmaster. She is taking this one up. 2 full pawns, and her pieces are in prime positions to escort those pawns. b5 now. The rook on d5 is excellent, protecting here. So just be careful not to hang a rook. And 1.3 seconds left for white. Didn't even look at the time, and that's a win on the clock in addition to winning on the board. So Nana Zagnidze needs very little introduction. Alexandra Goryachkina here with the black pieces. Can she actually win this? I don't think so. She took this pawn, take on b2. You have to take there. And now it's just going to be a draw. Pawn and bishop will stay defending each other. The rook will never lose this game. You can even sacrifice your rook for the pawn to make an immediate draw. And I think that white will play... Oh, I was going to say I think white will play on a little bit, but she decides, hey, I've had enough. That's all that needs to happen. So we have just a couple of games left here. Queen takes f7. g5 check. King h6, g5. So she had to move... Stalemate. Sacrifice your queen. Queen e3. Queen e3. No, queen f4. Oh, you can't sacrifice it. Oh, I'll show this as soon as this game finishes, but you need to sacrifice your queen. And she loses on time. But in this position, after queen takes g6, this king has no moves. So you need to find a way. Here, king f4. King f4 is a great move. King e4, queen d3 is immediately a draw. Because if you take my queen, your king's in stalemate. It's not in check, and it can't move. So king f4 makes it much more difficult for black to figure out. because where does this queen go? If you go to queen e3, which is what I was suggesting, this king come to f5, and after queen f4, king e6. Like the king is trying to escape, but you keep giving it checks, and I'm not sure it actually can escape. Maybe queen d6 was better, and after king f7 here, you have to take my queen, and then it's a draw. So you have to go full-on renegade. Give up your queen for the stalemate. We're moving on to the next game. This was a missed opportunity. The clock situation was not in her favor, but she had a draw if she was able to just get rid of her queen. And that's sort of counterintuitive. Like, wait, give up my queen to make a draw? That doesn't make sense. But if your king has no moves and you have no other pieces, you want your pieces off the board. So Vaishali here starts with a sort of closed system, enters right back into an open system by playing d4. We're in standard territory. We've seen a lot of Vaishali. Let's look at Karina Ambritsumova here with the white pieces taking on Polina Shuvalova with black. And this position here, you have pawn on e5. You have space for your bishop. This bishop on c8 does not have much space. So it looks like a French defense, but it's a Caro-Kann. And similar themes here. The bishop on c8, now on d7, not the best piece in the world. White is going to start pushing her pieces towards the king side. She can play f4, but I like that she hasn't committed to that move because you never know what you want to do with this bishop. Perhaps the bishop wants to go to f4. So queen h5, and now if g6, this bishop will want to go onto the h6 square. There will be holes in black's position on the dark squares. You have the Swiss cheese formation. Hey, everybody. Good to see you. Thanks so much for tuning into this. It's an amazing event. I'm having so much fun covering it. The Women's Speeches Championship qualifiers. So it's going to be a very long, next month, really, with all these events in the Women's Speeches Championship. So, you know, stay on the edge of your seat, but maybe not on the edge just yet because eventually you'll get a little tired and fall off. But it's a lot of fun, and I am enjoying it. Hope you do as well. So d4 was played to gain black some space. I mentioned this bishop on d7. Now if that bishop gets to c6, there's actually an open diagonal. So typically, white doesn't want to allow a sort of d4 move. You want to keep this pawn on d5 so the bishop can't get out. And here, once this d4 move is happened, the bishop will become better. But at the same time, white is playing on the king side. So there are some weak squares, maybe bishop h6 now, but you ask yourself, what are you really threatening? And the answer is nothing concrete. So rook d1 is smart, trying to dislodge this queen because there's a pin down the d file. If you move the knight out the way, knight f5, maybe there's bishop to b5 with a pin on this piece. I think that actually black can sacrifice the queen for a minor piece and a rook. There are plenty of positions where that's a good idea, especially with these split pawns on the queen side, right? The split pawns over here, not looking their best, hard to protect. So that's why you have these isolated pawns. You get frustrated because a pawn's best friend is another pawn, right? This pawn comes to b6, the pawn a7 protects it. You're never too worried about it. But now I'm permanently worried about my queen side. So what about bishop takes, knight takes e5? Then there's, okay, so bishop takes, knight e5, bishop f4, pinning here, hitting this. I have to go f6, and I don't really want to play f6, but it does hold the position together for now. So if she feels confident that taking that pawn doesn't result in some sort of checkmate, then she goes for it. The issue is, after knight e5, instead of bishop f4, pinning, you bishop f6, hitting the knight, threatening queen h6, threatening queen g7, checkmate. So that's the real downside here, is I get it, you want to steal the pawn in the center, but you're actually helping white launch an attack. Ooh, h5 is so risky. Knight takes f7 is on the agenda here. Now this looks problematic. I think you have to take this knight on g5. Otherwise, knight takes f7 happens. Okay, knight takes e6. This looks too dangerous, but maybe she can somehow get away with this. I'm not really believing it. Knight takes f7 also. I mean, knight f7, you have to go with the rook, bishop g6, your king's under attack, rook g7, bishop h6. I'm just going for you. You actually cannot do anything of note because if you go h4, I check you and take your rook. You'd have to play bishop. Oop. Bishop f7 also worked there, but I was going back to the live board here. Rook f8. You can take either pawn. It looks good. Wait, there might be a trick though. Maybe I blundered. Knight e6. Aha. So knight e6, bishop e6, bishop takes g6. There might be h4, kicking my queen off of the very important g file. So knight takes e6 would not have worked out. She starts bishop e4. This move still looks pretty good to me. I just feel like the attack... I just have faith in the attack. It feels like you can just blast the king open and go for checkmate. Bishop takes g6 now. So she stopped on e4 to take on g6. Now if pawn takes, knight takes, bishop takes, check. Here, check. here, and then take with check. So you steal all of black's pawns in front of her king. So you want to throw in this check on h6 to bring the king back to g8 so that when you take here, it's another check. Typically, that's a good strategy. And it may not be entirely necessary, but you just want to keep those captures with check in mind. So knight takes e6, queen g6 check, of course. Only move. I guess she was considering if she wants to take here, but then the knight would take back to protect the bishop. I was wondering why she would take some time. And now she takes... Oh, because of king here, you have bishop h6 check going for mate. And stealing that pawn is going to hurt. And actually, that one tempo, so she played bishop e4, which allowed rook to d8. She regrets that now, because if this rook were on c8, there would be a rook lift coming for a checkmate. So we can look at that after this game concludes, but it feels like maybe it won't impact her in this particular game, but that was probably a mistake. Just not taking right away. So she's got to take this, right? And how many pawns does she has? 4 pawns for a piece. It's not game over because black actually, if black fends off the attack, the immediate attack, those queenside pawns for white are really weak. So if you can get a queen trade to happen, then the knight that you're up, even though it's for 4 pawns, can actually make his presence felt. Okay, take on e6 with check. Good decision. Bishop h6, watch out. Queen g6 is check, and this rook is a problem. And if you ever take on d... Wait, can you take on e5? No, you have to take on d1 first. But rook d1, their mate is queen g6 check first, potentially. And then take back here. So I think this is also problematic. I think bishop f8, kind of an only move. Queen g6. You have to go rook g7, take it. Take again. And then, ooh, trading queens and playing rook d7 was winning. Now it's a little less winning, but take here. She doesn't want to trade queens. She's somehow concerned about this queenless position. Take the queen. Oh, that's actually really good too. But if she traded queens, she would play rook d7 at the end there, and the position would be winning. So Vaishali, she wins again. And just so everybody knows, there will be 2 breaks during this event. After round 5 and after round 10. It gives the players a chance to breathe after some 5 and 10 splits games. Also gives the fair play team an opportunity to do their work to make sure everything is going smoothly, which it is. Yesterday was very smooth, but it just gives everybody a chance to relax and reset. So knight c6, this bishop, you want to get after this bishop. h3 was important so that the king has some space, so you won't get back when you checkmated. And now queen f7. The one thing I don't want to allow is queen c1, queen f4, because my king on h2, that'd be an issue. She plays g3. Queen f7 also stopped that plan, but this is a nice, safe way to do so. Queen f7 here hits the bishop, threads queen h7, checkmate. Oh, hanging on by a thread. Just can you take on b7? She does. Knight e5. You have to play for some kind of attack. Queen c6. Wait. Oh no, she blundered the rook. She's fortunate that she has so many pieces that it's not. Oh, queen e4 check here. I think queen e4 check would be a decent move, but she's gonna give a bunch of checks. Queen e5. Queen e4. Play queen e4. Ooh, trading the queens would help you. So she might have queen b3 or something if she doesn't see anything better. I think this game is going to end in a draw. This has been a fascinating game. Wow. Wow, she unfortunately blundered the rook on b7. Happens in time trouble. But earlier in this game, I actually just want to point out that moment one more time because it is instructive. So she went bishop to e4 first, but her plan was to take on g6. So if we just change the position one little bit here, with queen g6 here, let's say you do the same exact thing as she did in the game. Here, check, here, takes. The king has to come here. Now I have rook to d3, which I didn't have when the rook was on d8. So she actually brought her opponent's rook into a better defensive position, and if she had this position, the king is just getting pretty much checkmated here. And you can do it by force. I mean, you can check back here just to force the king to the side and then play rook d3 and go for this kind of checkmate. I mean, it's just devastating. So she helped her opponent out unintentionally, obviously, by stopping the bishop first, and that allowed black to have an additional resource to help her king. Let's check out Mungsul Turmunk, who had a great showing yesterday. Playing another strong Indian player. India has a lot of talent, really. It's been very impressive to see the rise of the youngsters there. And we talk about Vaishali. We have awesome position with Vantika Agrawal. Just so many strong players. But right now, this is a struggle for white. Now that there's passed pawns on both sides of the board, this is going to be probably a losing endgame. But with 1 second, she barely got the move off. Oh, watch out! Don't lose e6. And take here. So, okay, actually, trading up pawns is very smart. Because if she could sacrifice her piece for, say, 2 pawns, f5. Ooh, f5 was a good move. And it's too late now. Here comes h2. Play h2. Okay, but now the problem for white now is if you sacrifice both your pieces for the pawns, a knight and a bishop versus a king is winning for the knight and bishop. So that's what black is trying to accomplish. So knight g5. Oh, you can't play knight g5. There's a king covering the square. But I want to bring my knight to f3. Knight g5 now. Knight g5. Oh, just winning this. That's even stronger, of course. So there's a queen, and black wins this game. That was a nice way to conclude the round. And, well, we have 5 rounds in the books. We have 2 players tied with 5 out of 5. And you see that they're all up to 8th place with 4.5 out of 5. And I see Alina Kashinskaya there. We haven't checked any of her games. We will with 4.5 out of 5 having a good event. So there are 222 players in the field, which means that after 13 rounds, we'll see who the top 8 will be. I'm guessing they'll be in the ballpark of 9.5 points, if I'm not making a mistake here. Maybe a little more because there are 8 rounds to go. Yeah, maybe 10 points. But either way, I'm going to go to a short break. We will be back in a few minutes, and when we return, we will go to round 6 of this Women's Speed Chess Championship qualifier. Stay tuned, everybody. And we are back here ready for round 6 of this Women's Speed Chess Championship qualifier. This is the second one. Yesterday we had the 5-minute plus 1 second increment. Today is 3 minutes plus 1 second increment. So a quicker pace, but more rounds. And I know it's interesting to think about the differences. Like, are some players just that much better at 5 minutes? Do the 2 extra minutes make a huge difference? The answer is definitely yes. I think that some players really struggle when there is minimal time. I know I'm one of those people, but playing bullet chess is really hard for me. It often hardly feels like chess because the pieces are flying and my mind's just trying to keep up. But here we have 3 minutes plus a 1 second increment. The top 8 players will make it to a knockout. And in that knockout, the top 2 finishers, so essentially the finalists, will qualify for the Women's Speed Chess Championship. And we are waiting for round 6 to take place. 5 rounds in the books. The players hopefully getting a little bit of rest before the next games. It is hard to play so many games in a row, and we have liftoff. So let's go to board 1 here, where we see that Petra Pop, she is taking on Vaishali here, and she has the white pieces, so she plays e4. And we have a Sicilian, so we hopefully get a sharp game here. Knight f3. We'll see what her response is. Taking a bit of time. Okay, now it's speeding up a little bit. And is she going to open the center? She does. So in these sort of close Sicilian lines, you have that choice. Knight d5. Knight d5. That's a move you don't see every day. And so you're trying to figure out what's the point of that. Am I just hanging a pawn here? Like, what if I take that pawn? But there have to be tricks, because knight takes e4. What is this line? I've literally never seen this line before. I guess just knight to b5. And maybe this is just on me for not having seen it. Maybe this is somehow a good weapon that has never caught my attention. I think you should take it. And if the queen takes, the queen's in a kind of an awkward spot, but now knight b5? Go after this pawn? This is a tricky line. I love this for a blitz game. I really like this because now you're threatening the pawn during knight c7, so you have to play queen d8 back. And after queen d8, I think bishop f4 makes sense to try to provoke e5. Whoa, what? I like this line. I'm going to have to play this in some blitz at some point. This is really cool. This is really cool. So bishop f4, teaming up on this pawn on d6. If you play e5, you stop the attack on d6, but now I have the d5 square under my control. So that's a big concession for black. Anytime you play any Sicilian, but especially like a Najdorf, if you have to play e5, you're worried about this d5 square. So I actually think that white can consider bishop g5. She drops the bishop to e3. That's safe and sound. But I was saying bishop g5 because I know the queen could take it, but then there would have been knight c7 winning this rook. Probably knight would have gotten trapped, so not worth it. But this position is now a standard Sicilian, where you can castle, play knight c3, or you can play c4, f3, kind of get a Maroczy bind. I'm learning. This is a cool Sicilian. I wonder what black could have done differently. I'm guessing that when this knight captured earlier on f6, black should have ruined her own pawn structure with g takes f6. Hard move to play if you don't know the line, especially in a blitz game. Whenever you take on f6 with the pawn, your king feels less safe. But now the king is perfectly safe, but strategically, it's good for white. I'm really like this line. I'm fascinated by it. So now the question is, you play for f4. She doesn't. She plays f3. I guess playing for some kind of flexible approach, but it's a bit slow. I was thinking maybe g3, f4, or something of that nature. She plays f3, which makes the e4 pawn feel better. But yeah, maybe she's going for the positional bind. How can you complain too much about this? If I'm black, I'm thinking h6, bishop g5. I want to get my knight to d4, get rid of this bad bishop. But the problem is, if my bishop ever leaves e7, this d6 pawn is weak. So that's very frustrating. So b5 chosen. If you go b4, you're inviting my knight into d5. That's the only reason why I have such a hard time figuring out the plans for black. Because if you're advancing on the queen side, but then your pawn a6 is a target, you're forcing my knight to where it inevitably wants to go. And now black is down a minute on the clock. This is a really tough spot here for her. And in comes the knight. So knight c4, you'll just take on c4. Bishop b6 is a deadly threat right now. Just taking on d5. Very sensible. And I think she'll take with the queen. There's this pawn d6. She spent a little bit of time there, but eventually takes with the queen on d5. Now I take this knight on c4. You don't have to. You can play bishop c1 to keep the two bishops, which is also looking good. But now I want to take over some of the squares. So bishop g5 does come to mind. But the issue is when there's the bishop moves, as I said, this you take this and this d6 pawn. So this bishop is kind of stuck still. So queen, I think queen d3, queen d2, stopping bishop g5. I'd play h6, I guess. But then h6, h4, and you're just asking for trouble. No matter what you're asking for trouble. I think white just has a good position. Rook c5 to try to go d5. I would move my queen over here and try to get bishop e3, I think. You don't want to allow d5. If you allow d5, then black is breaking the position open. The bishop now is useful. So what is she going to do here? Petra pop. Queen f2. So d5 still kind of possible. Because if bishop e3, you play d4. So d5 not played, but I thought you finally had the moment to do so. But 22 seconds, you probably don't want to make a committal decision. You're like worried that if I do that, is it going to backfire? Still d5 is possible, but then this bishop has some life. Whereas right now the bishop is just protecting c2. I would take and play bishop f5. Hit this rook. Just kick the rook off the c file, make c2 extra well defended. There it is. And now some kind of h5, g5. Just push my pawns at the enemy king. Just play g5 first. If g6, eventually I'll play h5, open up the h file. So knight came to f4. And you could actually consider taking here, going in an opposite colored bishop position, but there's no need. I'd probably put my bishop on e4. It feels a little safer there. Maybe take on d8 first, trade the rooks, and then put the bishop on e4, but I want my bishop on e4 for some reason. I can't quite figure out exactly why. Maybe it's because when I take on f4 and you take back with the e-pawn, the bishop won't be under attack. Hey, she played bishop e4. So knight came to e6. That stops h5 because you lose this pawn. So h5, g6 would be the idea, but this pawn needs some help, and this rook is now in trouble. Bishop d5. This rook is not trapped. It can start going this way. Odd. Wait, bishop b6 also is now a threat. That's why she played rook d5. So if she played bishop b6 right away, you would have taken on d1 with check. Now after bishop b6, there's no check. Huh? Okay, a3? I think it's trapped. a3. The rook has to come here and then... Okay, so she doesn't go for the rook trap. I think she's going to regret that decision. That rook was trapped. That rook was trapped over there. And the thing is, you play h6, you go g6. You play g6 and might have h6. Queen d6, good move, trying to trade off the queen. So Vaishali in time trouble plays really well. Rook d6. Now we're in a bad endgame, though. White has an extra pawn. It's even material, but white has an extra pawn. These are double and isolated. So you play c4. Or like b3, c4. You can actually just go for this pawn, huh? Go like that. Good move. Well timed. Wait, so actually, is there no way to take this pawn? So king d7. You have to have your king here. Because if the king were on c6, you would take this pawn with the king and then go for here. Ooh, this is a really bad position for this bishop. Oh, this is well done by Vaishali. Take this pawn g5 for sure. You got rid of one of your double pawns for this pawn g5. And I'm going to point this out because I always do. A pawn doesn't match the bishop. The corner doesn't match the bishop. So what black needs to do is trade off these pawns and the bishop. The bishop, it's going to be hard to show. These three for the c4 and the f3 pawn. As soon as that happens, to draw. Wrong color bishop. So that is what black needs to accomplish. They have made a draw. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this moment here because I think this was the critical one. Where taking on e6 didn't work out. a3, this rook has nowhere good to go. You go to a4 bishop to b3, hitting your rook. You go to a5 bishop b6. So your rook is just running out of squares. And any kind of rook takes b2, king g2 looks a little bit scary here, but there's no follow-up. Normally you just sacrifice all your pieces and go for some kind of check on c3. But once this happens here, I even have bishop back to b3 blocking it, and you're not checkmating me. So that was a cool game. It was a very fighting game. Let's go to Alina Danielian with the black pieces here. She won the Women's Speeches Championship last year, and she's taking on Alina Tomilova. And what's happening? This looks great for white. White wins on time, but white's winning on position. Also, only 1.9 seconds left for that win. So black just needed to play quickly. Wasn't able to accomplish that. Bishop. Okay, so this... Unfortunately for black, the A8 square is light, and this light square bishop. So, okay. Keeping this stuck. This is good technique. Very good technique. The king will have to come back this way. And now the problem is you have to play b5 and have bishop e3. Don't allow that pawn to push. Check back. Back here. Don't allow b6. Go bishop f2. Alright, so this is actually stubborn defense right now. You need to get your king to c6 so you can play b6. Bishop d2, b6, king a6. King a6. You got this. Oh, and bishop b5 check. No, bishop b5 I can just take on a5. She wins on time! Just in the position where she was making a draw with bishop takes a5. Ah, time trouble. I was trying to think of a move like bishop b5, but I take this pawn because after b7 I have bishop f4 and I cover the promoting square. But unfortunately she lost on time at that critical moment. And we're off to the next round. We have Alina Kashinskaya now at 5.5 points out of 6, tied for first place, three-way tie. And now she gets white against Vaishali. So this is going to be a critical game. Both players looking like they're in good position to go and qualify. But if you look down the standings, all the way up to 17th place has 5 out of 6. Right? 17th place with 5 out of 6. That's crazy. It just, there's so many people in this tournament, so many strong players that you lose one game and you go from first place down into 11th place, and then you're trying to climb back into the top 8 once more. So Alina playing solidly. She plays very quickly in the opening, which is good. She's a well-prepared player. She works very hard on her chess. Vaishali has shown a tendency to get into some time trouble in these blitz games, but when in time trouble, oh man, her defense is unbelievable. Several games in this event. The one game she was down in exchange, she found the queen a8 check, rook takes a2, and in that last game there, she looked like she was about to lose that endgame. She held on. So she puts her knight on e4. She can take this bishop on c3, but white will just take back with the rook, claim that I have more space in the center. I'm a little bit, it looks like I'm a little bit behind in development because my king's in the center, but that's not a big deal. I can just castle. We have 2 pawns out here for white. And you take on c3 now that the castle has happened because the bishop was trying to go to e1, excuse me. And if the bishop can stay on the board, that's one of white's advantages. So you take after the castle. Don't allow white to even think about keeping the bishop pair. d6. And I look at this position, I think, well, is black really worse here? Not really. This pawn b4, pawn c4, pawn d4 configuration looks good. You're gaining space. You are limiting this knight on d7. But now that we have an asymmetric pawn structure, I'm looking at some kind of rook c8, rook to d8, and go and attack these hanging pawns. What are hanging pawns? If just you have c4 and d4 pawns, they're called hanging pawns. You ever push one of them, the squares weaken around it. So I expect if you take on f3, I just take with the queen, and now I have all the control of the light squares. So knight f6 first. Knight e5. You can't take twice on d4. Takes. Rook d4 runs into bishop h7 with check, and then this rook will take your rook next move. So that would be a blunder by black. And all right, so rook to c8. And white is doing well for the time being. Your pieces look good, but where to from here? That's the essential question. What are the ideas for white? It's not easy to find them because bishop b1, let's say you go queen c2 next. Are you really threatening checkmate? No, there's a knight on f6. So you're trying to, and actually if you go queen c2, I'll play bishop e4 anyway. And now actually that brings bishop e4 to mind potentially right away, trading off the bishop. You can also play knight e4 if you want. But either way, she plays bishop e4, it's a good move. Either way, I don't see what white's trying to accomplish. Not that white has misplayed, I think white's position is fine, but I think that ideas are often easier in a position like this for black. Okay, rook I'm taking here now. Takes. My knight's under attack. If I go knight to d6, put pressure here. This knight can come to f5 to put pressure here. It feels like a very sound position for black. No weak pawns. That's the thing. But white's pawns are a little more out there and potentially vulnerable. Black's, where are you going to attack my pawns? My pawns are all defended, right? This pawn defends this one. Got a pawn chain here. White can try to take over the d file. So actually, that was a moment where White could have captured on c5 and put the queen on d2 and gone for the d file. I think that would have been really smart, actually. This also looks pretty good, advancing your queen out, threatening knight c6. So queen c7, keeping this pawn stuck on d4 to protect the knight. h3, make sure there's no back rank checkmates ever. I would think about taking here. I think you now definitely take here. The one big issue for black, though, is you can't play knight to d7 because knight d7 hangs the f7 pawn. If you could play knight to d7, you might just be strategically much better. Because by trading the knights, this pawn becomes weak. And if I get my rook to d7, double my rooks here, this pawn is under attack. But you can't go knight d7. The queen is needed to protect the f7 square. So this queen might have to go back to e7 at some point. Right now, queen e7. You covered the c6 square. That's why the rook came up to d6, so that queen e7 doesn't run into knight c6. But I think you have to go queen e7 and meet g5 and knight to d7. So now knight d7, watch out. Knight 7, knight takes f7. Tactics. If the queen takes, I take your rook. So there are tactics available to... Oh! Uh-oh. Knight takes f7. Take that thing. That's a pawn. But knight takes f7, there might be rook c6, and somehow it's not so bad. I guess black's position was so structurally sound before this position that it's okay to even lose this f7 pawn. And knight takes f7 played, rook c6, quick response. That is something to see there. Just the composure to play knight takes f7, just rook c6. Just go back. Now we trade knights on e5. This pawn h4 is actually under attack. This pawn on c4 is under attack. You don't want this rook to land here, so rook c1, offering the rook trade. The rook d7, I just take it because your rook on d1 is pinned and can't leave the first rank. Now black is better. I think black is better. This king is actually safer than white's king. So rook c4. Okay, she goes rook to d8, just trading pieces. The queen is stuck to the defense of the h4 pawn for the time being. Ooh, I like that move. That's a really strong move, rook d6. If you take me on d6, I get a pass pawn. So rook f8, going after this pawn f2. That was a really good move. It also stops the queen from attacking the pawn here. This pawn, though, requiring the queen's defense. So g5, you might be able to just take and play rook f5. Rook f5. Ah, can't draw the arrow right. There's rook f5. f4, only move. And it's annoying because here there's rook to d8. That would be a blunder. g6 is tempting at every turn, but then rook h5, rook h6. My rook gets back, and then once my rook's there, I'm going to attack your pawn g6. So 30 seconds for Alina. Her position is certainly improved. Her queen is a bit stuck for just a moment. Threatening rook to d8, but check king g3. Wow. So check here. King h7. Queen f3 threatening queen h1. This king is not... Rook h8. Rook h8 is mate. Queen h5 mate. Ouchie. Queen h5. Just go queen. You can take the rook and be up a rook, but this wins the queen. And take here. No, this is over. Okay, I just want to go back to in this game because that was pretty nuts. I mean, just well done here by Alina to push this pawn up. And you probably want to play queen f7 as black to go after here, but there's check, king up, check, forking. You can't take. You take this way and then rook h8 check, distracting your king away from this queen. And there's nowhere to go to keep the queen safe, so you take, I take, winning for white. So well done by Alina. She's playing excellent chess these days. King d4, f3. King back here, protecting the pawn. That was good technique. Now the king comes to e3, and it is going to be a win here for Le Tao Win Pham. Vietnamese WGM. No, now she's just up a knight. And winning. Alright, so let's go to Grandmaster Stefanova's game. She made it all the way to the knockouts yesterday. She was eliminated, so she's back trying to qualify again. f6 check, king up. So king e6. Am I pushing my pawn through? Not yet. Knight to d5, good move. Knight check. Knight f5, game over. Ooh, this also... Wait. If you take with the pawn, you lose. Oh, you don't lose because king f8, there's king e5, but this doesn't win. This is a draw. Okay, that was an improper move order leading to a draw. They both know it's a draw now. Yeah, so they're going to play this out a little bit, probably out of frustration on Stefanova's part, but yeah, that's good. You want to keep your king in front of the pawn as much as possible. You want to blockade it, and then if you can put a king right in front of it, do so. And otherwise, you want to keep your king in front of it. So that's a draw. We're going to go back. Because here, it was just a case of slightly wrong mover. F7 was, oh, but knight f5, you can't even take on g4. Because then I go f7, your king can't stop my pawn. So knight f5 first was important. The knight now has no access to f7. You go to g8, I go f7. I win because I'm going to queen or just take your knight. So knight f5 first was critical. Okay, let us keep on going. Meenakshi wins with black. Chelsea Monaco. Oh, new games. Chelsea Monaco up to 6 points and playing against Petra Pop. So Petra Pop doing very well here. Now we get another. We'll probably see knight c3, like we saw last time, and then d4. Yeah, we saw this. A rendition of this. Let's also open up Alina Kashinskaya. She is taking on international master, another strong Indian player. This is Vijaya Lakshmi Subaraman from Chennai. So here we see this position where it's a London system. Very good for blitz chess. The moves are pretty easy to play. You get this formation, the pyramid pawn structure. The pieces go like this almost always. And good response by Alina, going queen to b6, putting pressure on b2. And challenging white setup, saying, well, what's your response to me? Rook to b1, safe and sound. You got a castle. It's actually quite easy to play this position for white. And it's frustrating as black because you want to play ambitiously. You want to play for something rather than just, oh, I'm just going to fend you off, stop your ideas. No, you really want to have ideas of your own. And in these positions, generally speaking, white is extremely solid. So let's keep on going down the list here. We have what I'm trying to figure out what this came from. A Slav? How did this happen? I just looking at the opening trying to figure this out. E6, E. Okay, this early E4. So if you take, you at D5, E F5. So it looks like a French, and kind of a bad French, honestly. I guess like there are some possibilities for later for black to consider going for G5. The bishop is out here. This bishop, I find this very suspicious. Very suspicious. I don't like the French bishop, of course. It's stuck behind the pawns, but eventually you'll castle and then bring the bishop out this way. And this knight can consider coming to F4. I would think about playing H4. I think, generally speaking, white's doing well. So, this position here, I think, is very solid for white, no weaknesses. I think black is playing for the long term. And if you can pile pressure on the d4 pawn, you get some good play, but the bishop needs to reroute itself. I can't really look at this pawn structure anymore, so I'm going to look at this pawn structure instead. I like these pawns here. They look better to me. What happened in this game? So it was a London system. I thought everything was solid, and the next thing I know, e5 happens, and the bishop's under attack, and e4 is a threat forking the pieces. So g4 was forced, and now black is just winning because Alina's up how many pawns? She's up 3 pawns here. So just a mistake, a one-move oversight. Playing a3, not recognizing that e5 was coming, hitting the bishop, playing e4, because after e5, this knight is pinned on f3 to the queen, and so the game continued at necessity g4, not a move you want to play. We see some trades, and yeah, already resignation. Alina is really strong, playing great chess. Let's go back to this game here. Chelsea Monaco with the black piece. Queen c4 just played. This knight's under attack. This pawn's under attack. Can't protect both. Cannot protect both. Actually, that was just a very good move. And white is down. Almost a minute and a half at this point. Queen takes a4. That's a pawn. Where's this knight even going? Knight to d6. Not a move you want to play. I'm thinking b5, b4. Can I just push that pawn through? d4. Knight to b4 coming. But I don't like giving up this pawn in the center. Knight b4, there's queen to b3. I think that was a big mistake. And she played it quite quickly. She has plenty of time. Queen b3 now. Run this queen right here. Try to trade queens. Now your center is better. White all of a sudden is happy. Can't even take this pawn. She plays d5 because she has a great pawn chain and a connected passed pawn on d5. Knight c4 comes to mind now, hitting e5, threatening to go to b6. But knight d3, no, this is really good for white. So black went wrong by playing d4. d4 did not feel necessary. I thought b5, b4 was just a way to get active there. So after knight to d3, she's thinking b5. Can I just take this pawn here? She takes this pawn here instead. But this is actually better for black than earlier because you want to open the position. So you want to play rook a4, pawn b4, rook a8, and go for some kind of checkmate here. So rook a4 now. Here comes b4. The big problem with b4 is allowing knight to c4 because that knight wants to get to b6. But knight c4, there's rook a8. I guess just king c2. That's amazing. The king can just go to c2 and there's no problem. The king will just start running towards the center. And this knight on c4 is so strong. So if not for rook a8, what can you play? Queen a7 actually might just be stronger. Because queen on a7, if the king tries to run away, you have queen f2 check. There's queen a7. Good move. Good move. I was trying to just put the rook over there, but then I realized the queen is a better placed piece. What does white do now? Rook d1. Do I start with rook c8 here? Just to try to get the king? But white is trying to go d6. So it's not like black can sit forever and do nothing, right? You can't just say, oh, eventually I'll break through. No, white is going to play d6, d7, and before you know it, the pawn is about to promote. So what else can you do here? I'm trying to figure out a plan. Rook c8. I think that invites d6 though. King here. Oh, there's going to be rook takes c1. Rook d2. Rook c1. Queen f1 check. Take this thing. Uh-oh. Nice tactical vision by Chelsea Monica there. White didn't have much time. Nice find. Rook d1, take on c4 check. Wait, taking with the rook was bad. Taking with the rook was very, very, very bad. She had so much time. Taking with the queen. Trade off here. Your knight then comes to c6, and then your knight comes back. So let's go to the live position. And now white is checkmating black or getting a queen. Just promote me. No, don't bring that rook off the first rank. Okay, it's okay. But that's very scary. You don't want to just do that. She's no time. No time. 2.9 seconds left. Check. King a2. Rook a7. You have rook d1. She just found with 0.3 seconds left. Oh my gosh. She sacrificed her queen. No. This queen g4 check. Queen g4 check. Rook d7. Oh no. In time trouble. And she's losing all her pawns. Queen takes e5. Not used to the time trouble. That was a crazy turnaround. She was just trying to move as quickly as queen c2 check and rook a6 checkmate. So there's actually many instructive moments in this game. First and foremost, I want to say that at this point over here, that after you have 44 seconds left for black, the 2.4 seconds, I get the urge to try to flag your opponent, but this is a moment where I would really take a little bit of time, and then I'd play queen takes c4 check when I realize that when we get to this position here, I'm the one still with plenty of time. And if you play, king to b1, I have knight c6. You play d7, I have knight to d8. And my knight blockades your pawn. I'm just bringing my king in to win the pawn in the near future. So it just felt like a rushed choice, and I get it, because when your opponent's in time trouble, you really want to flag them. But white was winning. White was completely winning here. And this move, rook to d8, just played on nerves, right? This queen attacks the rook. I'm scared about that. But unfortunately, it ended up not working out. I mean, it was winning, but it didn't end up converting into a win. So what's happening here? Valentina Gunina has the black piece. 2 seconds for each player. Queen b1 check. Queen c2 check. Pre-move that. Okay, this check works too. Take this pawn. Gunina lost in time. Irina Bulmago gets the victory because the clock. Ah, that's frustrating here. She's probably trying to figure out how to win. She said that if you take on a4, you allow many checks. And she's still trying to win, and then she lost on time. Oh, that happens to all of us. I feel for you. It's happening to me. Oh, gosh. Rook and bishop versus rook with no time. No fun. Rook c3. Should have played rook c3 and then bring the king up. So play rook c3, protect the bishop. Now the rook doesn't belong here. You need to protect the bishop so your king can move. So rook back to e3. Bring the rook to the third rank. King d5. Up. Check here and then bring the rook back. Or now bring the rook back here. Okay. Nope. This check doesn't help because you have to bring your king back. 2.5 seconds though for black. Oh gosh. Bishop check. Just throw it in a check. Oh, this is getting dangerous. I think it's going to end up in a mate. King d6 there would have allowed rook takes e4. So, oh, what a sneaky move, rook g7. King c6. Here it comes, king c6. King c6, I think, was winning. King b6. The problem is the bishop on f5. The bishop here covered the square, but moving the bishop here, oh, checkmate. Check and mate. It's too hard to play this position for black. So even if white doesn't play optimally, you have to find every single correct move for black just to even hope to make a draw. So we're now on to round 9. Alina Kashinskaya in first place with 7 out of 8. We have 2 players with 7 out of 8. And then out there in 8th place is 6.5 points. Many players there with 6 out of 8. So they're hoping for some draws and some wins of their own so they can hop into a tie at the top of the leaderboard. So Alina plays the exchange Slav and bishop g5, waiting for the knight to get here so you can just capture it. That's sort of the plan, and to double black's pawn structure. So also by putting the bishop on g5, you cleared the c1 square for the rook. Quick development on the queen side. Knight f3, pawn e3 stuff, queen to b3 at the right moment, hitting d5, hitting b7. So taking and playing e3. I think in general, in blitz games, having double pawns is very difficult because when you have double pawns, you're always worried, are they safe? Is my king safe? Here you see these double pawns. Is this king castling king side, or is that going to be directly under attack when this queen comes to h5? So I think it's a smart strategy to give your opponent double pawns in blitz games if it doesn't cause you too many problems yourself. So at b5, when that was played, I'm already looking at the c5 square. Can I play knight d2? Can I play knight b3? Can I get my knight into c5? And here's knight d2. That opens up the queen again to the king side. Black can play f5 at any moment, which closes down the bishop. But if you play castle and play f5, white will play g4 to open up the position in front of the black king. So I see knight a5. When I see that move, is the knight coming into c4? I'm just trying to stop knight to b3. I'm going to trade here. Good move, though, knight a5. Let me open another game. Chelsea Monaco taking on Bashali. Ooh, this is looking tough for black already. a5. I feel like I've seen a Hikaru game like this against Jeffrey Jean in the 2018 U.S. Championships, I want to say. Someone can fact check me on that, but this looks like a position from there. So rook to b8 was played. I keep hovering inside. Rook to b8 was played to protect this pawn on b7. So if this bishop has to move from b6, then you're not losing this pawn on b7. But there are going to be tactics on that square anyway. For instance, a5. If you took with the bishop here, this rook takes b7, rook takes b7, bishop takes c6, hitting 2 rooks, hitting this knight over here. That would be a problem for black. And so queen to d7, trying to put this bishop to h3, trade off this really wonderful fianchetto piece. And this bishop is the strongest piece on the board. I think rook to b5 makes sense. Trying to go a5. I would certainly look at that move. Queen c1. Don't quite get it, but perhaps getting ready for this knight takes b6 so the queen go to e3. Not sure I love that move. Not a bad move, right? It doesn't blunder anything, but I'm not quite seeing what the intention is. So bishop h3 was played by Vashali. Good move. And so queen to b7. Queen to b7 is a good move. Queen to b6 is a good move. Queen to e3 is a good move. Queen to e3 is a good move. Queen to b6 is a good move. Queen to b7 is a good move. Queen to b6 is a good move. Queen to b7 is a good move. Queen to b6 is a good move. Queen to b7 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 is a good move. Queen yeah, this is looking like white's best piece is coming off. The king will feel less safe. All this stuff. All right, so 93. I don't know what this queen c1 93. I don't think that was really the plan. I think that she kind of felt forced into it rather than out of actively wanting to play like this, because this bishop on a3 isn't really doing anything. It has an open diagonal, so that looks good, and beyond that, it's not actually. Ooh, I would consider taking right now. So c4 played, bishop takes e3, then queen takes e3, and this pawn a7 is left undefended. Not the most important pawn in the world, but I'm spying on that pawn. So c6, trying to keep the status quo. If you play c5, your bishop on a3 goes from looking good to being blocked by its own pawn. But can't speak. If you can ever get this move, you're opening c4 for the knight and putting pressure on b7. So this is an interesting one. Knight f5. I'm also looking at knight h4 check. You may be asking, what are you talking about knight h4 that gives away a piece? But if, say, white went e4, knight h4 takes, queen g4 check, king here, check, king here, maybe even rook e6, rook g6 trying to go for checkmate. But the point is that I have at very least a draw. So I'm looking at knight h4 check ideas, a knight sacrifice to, if I need it at any point, to go after this king. And I think that the game, queen d5 check though, that runs right into e4. Haha. I was like, oh, I'm winning the c5 pawn. So rook e6 was played with the intention of some kind of attack. Knight to d4. If you take here, I take with my e pawn, and then my rook on e6 stares down e2. Rook e1, solid. So this pawn is the big problem. So black was rook g6. It's not really so much about potential. h5 though. I would start trying to do this. h5, h4. Ooh. So rook d8, not possible because this pawn's bishop e5 was the choice. I don't like the bishop on e5. It had to go here, but I would prefer it not to be here. So bishop f6. But then this rook looks silly. Maybe rook g4 was a possibility when this rook was here. So some kind of d4. And then trade on e6, but it's going to be hard to actually get to black's pawn. So this could backfire. Bishop f6. If you start taking on e6, I'll trade off with another pair of rooks. Rook e4, hoping to take here and play e5. Pretty smart. Very smart response by Faishali. And now, this is a big difference. The pawn's on f5 rather than f4. If, in this... Oh, that's a rook. That's a rook. And we've seen this now 2 games in a row. So Chazmanica is an amazing player. She's really impressing everybody. But there are these moments, you have 57 seconds, your opponent has 10 seconds. You need to just take a breather, just to calm down. And it's hard because you want to win on time in addition to playing on the board. But blundering the rook here, it feels like these are just little things that if she spent a little more time at those moments, I really think that her rating will get even higher. She's already very impressive, but it just goes to show that for even some of these super strong players, mistakes happen. Arina Bumaga drew her game just now against Alexandra Maltsevskaya. And, well, we have even pawns in a rook endgame. Probably would have tried to play this out a little bit, maybe, but yeah, there's nothing really going on here. All right, what's happening here? Ooh, that's check. Not mate, but one check. Rook e8, though, wins the queen. That hurts. That really hurts. And that's a pin and a win. Here we have Marie Sebag with the white pieces. Wait, that's a hanging rook with check. That's a checkmate in 1. Who is Mitra Hejasipur? Sorry for the mispronunciation. She wins with black. Very strong player. And all right, let's go here. Whoa, that king's almost made it. G3 allows rook h2 though, and the king comes up. That's nicely done. King coming back doesn't help. So sometimes you just try to bring your king back to help out, but it's not going to work. The king and rook are doing too well together for black. You can check. This pawn marched up the board, and it's gone. Pawn's gone. And now there are two of them. King G3, King F2, or Pawn F2, doesn't matter. Or winning on time. Daisy Corey winning with the black pieces there. Still have plenty of games. This one's winning for sure for Petra Pop. She was the one who played against Chelsea Monica in the 8th round and had the extra queen, but in time trouble, she got nervous and ended up losing that game. Here, I don't think she has such a problem. Her opponent has less time. She's 4 seconds. Just no stalemates. It's the one thing to avoid. Brings her rook to there. So now her king's going to come up to G3 or to E3. Check here. Pawn push, pawn push. Just run this pawn down. And F2 and F1. So this one is you can just pre-move the rest of the game. Go, rook at, just push the pawn, king D2, E2, E1. And she has plenty of time. It's now 7+ seconds. She's winning this game. Rook F2 or Queen G2, Rook H1 coming and winning. And one last game, Dr. Queenie taking on Lenzer. And white is up a queen for bishop. Queen D7 check. Queen D8. Ooh, got the move with 1.2 seconds left. And just going to win on the clock now. So we get to round 10, where we have one player in first. We have two players tied with 7 after 9. Chelsea Monica there in 4th through 13th. The 4th through 14th. Wow, so many people there. So we're going to start with this game between Alina Kashinskaya and Harika Jodavali. Harika played well yesterday, and I'm just looking at the scoreboard there. There is going to be a big competition down the stretch here. 13 rounds, still have 4 games to go, including the one that's now underway. And Alina takes on the King's Indian defense here. Watch out, this pawn's under attack. You play F3. You have a solid pawn formation, but black does this stuff all the time. Knight H5, trying to go for the dark squares. Knight C2, retreating knight, so we don't have to trade too much here. And if this bishop were to leave E3, then the F4 square would be black's for the taking. So that's why knight to C2 is played, just to keep more pieces on the board. F5, challenging the center. Thematic. If you take, I can even take with my bishop, and then try to take your knight on C2. And your bishop on E3. You open up the E file for the black rook. So, takes, watch out, down here. So bishop D3 should probably be played, just so you don't end up making a mistake and blundering this bishop. And it's sort of unfortunate because you play knight to C2 to try to keep the position closed, and your opponent immediately plays F5, and then now you're kind of like, I wish I could play knight to D4, but I can't because my bishop is hanging on E3. So spending a lot of time here. Bishop D3. She was bishop D2, but I was thinking this knight can probably come into D4. Wait, can I take here? Some kind of... I think it's holding on by a thread, but here... Where's the queen go? To D3, takes. Bishop takes B2, you have rook to B1. What's happening? Knight D4 now. And it feels like there should be just like some kind of tactic that almost wins the game for black, but it doesn't appear to be the case. I would need to have one more piece in the attack. So Queen H4 is played to get that piece into the attack, but they rook to E1. Just protect. Then black will play knight F4, trying to get rid of the dark square bishop. Bishop E5 actually is going to be a big threat too. So knight E4. I would play knight F4. I wouldn't take this bishop. Play knight F4. And by playing knight F4, you force this bishop off the board. So knight F4 takes, and I have the dark squares under my control. So she plays bishop E5, g3, she plans take on g3, ripping open the white king, and if we get some position like this, I think I have rook e5, or, whoa, I have rook takes e2. Wow, it's hanging right away. So wait, what does white do now? Because f4, I have just knight takes f4. This looks too good to be true. Looks too good to be true, but I think it's just working out for black. And white dilly-dallied one move too many in the opening. And now black's play was very natural and the attack is very strong. h3 is a move you never want to play in such a position with a bishop on e5. What other moves are even possible here? I mean, h3 is, you don't want to play it, but I think you had to just based on the other tactics. And now it's just trying to go for a win. So knight g3 comes to mind. Knight f4, of course, comes to mind. I think knight f4 is just strong. You force the bishop to capture you. Take with the queen. But then you have g3. So it's like you're barely hanging on here. And then you get f4, perhaps, if you're lucky. So knight g3 was played. Going for the dark squares. And if we get a trade here. Wait, what? No, this can't be good. This is a big check. I guess your king comes to f2, then I have to check here. f4, I think blunders, takes, check. King here just takes. This looks losing. It looks losing. Unfortunately. This is just such a strong attack. I don't even see a good move to defend. So queen h2 check. That was smart because if king came to f2, there'd be bishop g3 with check. But here, if bishop g3, there was queen takes d4 and the queen drops back here. f4, knight g... Where's the mate? Let me start with bishop d4. Good move. Knight g3 is mate next. And queen g1 is also mate. That's game. Replacing the knight with a bishop on d4. Pretty strong. Pretty strong. Wow, that was a nice game by Haruka Dronavali. From start to finish, 21 moves. Just white never really had her feet under her in that opening. Oh gosh, this looks very bad for black. So this bishop on c6 is necessary to defend d5. White has control of the game's only fully open file. But after knight c7, the hope is that if you trade on c6, the rook gets active. And so the bishop came back. Knight a2 to b4 comes to mind. Knight b3 to a5. Similar. Rook a8, it's a good move. You can't allow just these rooks to control the board so much. So if you can trade off both pairs of rooks, you feel better about your chances. And in fact, after rook a7, rook a8, you may find yourself having to trade rooks. The game is still not solved here. Knight a5. And then so knight b5. But I like knight a5 just to bring this knight to b4. But this king also can go right to b4. And that knight on a8 is a particularly not good piece. Can black try b6? Wait, that hangs b7. No, that's a time trouble mistake. I've been talking about how Vaishali's been so good in time trouble. Today, not today. This game, not going our way. Frank Rudden, yes, there is a break after this round. Hey, everybody. Good to see you. Knight to b5. Trying to trade knights off. Bishop takes here, but is white going to be able to get after the pawns? I think so. Look at this pawn chain. That is a protected pawn here. From f2 to c5. It is just all defended. This knight is about to get trapped. King b3. Knight c1, king b2. And that's it. Just take this knight and then king c3. Now you're up 2 pawns. Yeah, this is winning. And there's no way to even blunder this yet. Resignation. So back around here, you had to play b6. The knight protects the square, but I guess the issue is knight takes. This pawn eventually feels super loose. But for the time being, you're holding down everything. So yeah, this game was decided at that moment, and then the knight got trapped, and white went up a second pawn. Okay, let's go to this ending here. Ooh, 1.3 seconds left for black, but also a very tough position because this pawn is promoting. So, Munzel Trumunk, she wins her game. What's happening here? This is a draw. Don't bring your king up, though. That's the thing. You need to keep your king on these two squares. Only save squares for the king. Because if the king were to move elsewhere, just to show this, king c2, you have rook 8-1, trying to promote next move, because your rook protects the promotion square, and if the rook takes, you have rook a2 check, winning the rook on the other side of the board. So let's keep on going. We have Anna Sargsyan with the black pieces. We have it's an all Armenia matchup because playing with the white pieces, Maria Gevorgyan. And what's happening here? Now white is just down a pawn. b3, knight a, like bring the knight to a4, push the pawn down. And actually, there are moments where you can even give up the knight and the pawn for the bishop. You just trade off and then get into a winning pawn in the game. But this is certainly the way to go. b3, king comes to c4. And now you just bring your knight to attack the pawn. So knight d6 or knight c3, didn't really matter. Take the pawn. Yeah, now you take this. Ooh. King b3. Perfect. Knight c3 is checkmate. And black wins. And black wins a nice one there. So we are all done with the 10th round. And after 10 rounds, we see that we have a sole leader right now. And that's, I mean, honestly pretty cool to see. We have Letao Win Pham there from Vietnam. She's clearly playing excellent chess at 9 out of 10. We have 4 players there with 8 out of 10, and then a bunch of players at 7 out of 7. So all of these players still have a chance to qualify. We're going to take another break. The players will get some rest. The fair play team will do its work. And when we return, we'll have the final 3 rounds of the Swiss, and then we'll get to the knockouts. Stay where you are, everybody. I will be back in just a few. we are back. I was mid-bite of apple running back to the computer so that we could cover the 11th round of action here. We see that Harika Jordan takes on the one player with 9 out of 10. So 9 out of 10 is an amazing performance thus far. Harika is an amazing player, so it's going to be an interesting battle here. We see in the center, there is now tension on e5. So black plays d6 to challenge for white's center. e5 was restricting black as an advanced pawn. So after this trade on d5, I'm thinking eventually the e5 will open up. So d4. This is to take advantage of the fact that black's king is in the center, undeveloped king side, and undeveloped queen side. So white is ahead by those standards. However, black is very solid here. There's no weak square to pile up pressure on. Typically, if your opponent's king is in the center, you want to go after it. You want to attack a pawn or a square. Right now, it doesn't seem clear where that's going to happen. Oh, c4. It feels like you're playing with fire here. I'm looking at c4. I mean, just something on this diagonal and then something on this diagonal. It feels like an issue. So she plays rook e1, trying to eventually open up the e file, but c takes d4 here. Yeah, something, it feels like, I really feel like some kind of c4 would have been powerful. But okay, this is now the position. And what is white going to do? Because now the e5 pawn is sort of overextended. If you take on d6, bishop takes d6, it's you're developing, you're castling. Everything seems safe and sound for black. So I'll keep this game open. I just want to make sure I have my eye on multiple games because we are heading down the home stretch of this tournament. So I'm opening as many as possible. This one is looking solid. Goryachkina at 7.5 points. She wants to sneak her way back up into the top 8. She lost yesterday in the quarterfinals, if I'm not mistaken, to Kayuning. And now with the black pieces, solid, but it's not like white has any huge difficulties. Petropop playing well today. So let's go back to board 1 because we now have a closed position over these last few moves where the king's on g2, so there was a trade, just to go back here. This trade, and then black kept the position a little more closed because the king is in the center. So this way, bishop c5 can be played, finish the development. If you had taken on e5 instead of trading, now this pawn g7 is a target. The bishop is stuck on f8. So queen to g4, good move coming after this pawn g7. One of the big downsides of having delayed your castle so much is white gets these kind of tempo moves. That now the queen came to g4, I exited the attack from your bishop. Now your pawn g7 is attack. You castle at bishop h6, piling up pressure on the pinned pawn. You move g6 to take your rook. I win in exchange. So after queen g4, you already have a tough decision. Do you play g6, in which case this bishop may come into f6. This is looking better for white than I anticipated. So d takes c4. And now queen d5 check. Queen d5 check and castle queenside. And then what? Bishop e3 maybe as a defensive move? Yeah, this bishop was very strong here, hitting the f2 pawn. Yeah, now this pawn is under attack. So, okay, this game has been interesting thus far. Both sides have a chance. Queen takes f7. The plan is h4. Good move to capture. Now queen f7 hits e6, hits a7. Actually, black looks like she's in really big trouble here. Queen takes a7. It's a pawn. h4. There's probably b3 or something to that effect. Just going for this pinned pawn here. And you want to get h3, queen g2 checkmate. Of course, it's one idea. H takes g3, and if the h pawn takes, there's a problem here. Now if h takes... Wait. H takes is f takes. Okay, I was going to say h takes rook c4 would look good if not for g takes h2 check, and I'm getting a new queen or winning your rook on c4. So queen e4. White is up a pawn. b3 is about to try to win this pawn. a4, a6. This was smart, b3. h3 is good because it keeps this rook stuck on the first rank. Otherwise, it would be rook d1 checkmate ideas. So rook f4, trying to get up into the position here. Also protects the pawn f2 preemptively. Rook d5. Black is really fighting quite well. So f4. I think you can just play f4 and then bring this rook to e2 if needed. But this rook is kind of coming to d3 at this pawn. Honestly, black is really defending well here because the king wanted to go to e2, but if the king had gone to e2, this pawn would have been hanging out. Rook d1 check, rook h1. She could have brought the rook around there. Instead, she's bringing the h7 rook over to a7, and she's going to play a4. And 16 seconds left for black, not much time. Bringing the rook to d7 makes sense. Going to rook d2 check and all this good stuff. Rook d3, there's take, rook e3. So actually trading rooks probably doesn't help you. Oh, king here. Giving up this pawn. No way. The rook is behind the passed pawn, but king... Rook c8. Okay, queen, you take, and then b4. Is this king in time with king e4? Or is the g pawn that fast? Rook a8. No, it's not in time. b3, b2, b1. Oh, man. And it's another moment where g4 was played very quickly, but I think there might have been a defense with the king running back. And so she can take this, and she can't take on h3. Queen f1. Queen f1 check. Can't take on h3. Loses the rook. What a save here. Because black was in big trouble, just down a pawn. We got to go back in time. At this point here, king e4. Then there's a2. And the problem is there's still this b3, b2 stuff. And I'm trying to get either of these pawns to queen. So at this point, it's already good for black. But it didn't have to be this way. After take, rook e3, you still have this pawn that you can push, and you're up a pawn. So an unfortunate turn of events for Harika Dronavali there. And I think that we can safely say that with 10 and of 11, that should be qualification in the top 8. I don't see a way that she doesn't make it. Just 2 rounds left. And yeah, she's already qualified at the top. And okay, what's happening here? Isn't white just up a rook is Vaishali? So barring any kind of crazy blunder, should just be a relatively smooth conversion. Queen e5 is good. You can now get a check here or rook check here. Queen e6. Queen h6 is coming. Rook f2. Queen f6. Queen takes queen. Rook f5. And let's go to more games. Okay. So white is up a pawn. Rook h6 check is annoying, but you're losing this pawn. So there's no way for black to lose. Put the rook... Ooh, actually there is a way. Rook check. I spoke just a moment too soon there. And give this check. Put the king on f7. So black should not lose this game, but there are possibilities of losing. King f8, there's rook f1. So okay, now there's none. If you bring your king into an open line, then the rook will swing with check to whichever way you go. Otherwise, you're not making any progress here. Just move your king anywhere. King f8, there's rook f1. So what I would do if I were white is I would... Oh, rook f1. Oh! The king can't move out still, I guess. But this is getting dangerous. Rook d2. So the rook finally came to d2. But there's nowhere to go now. The king can't leave because of any kind of check. And it's a draw. Good effort, though. Very good effort. And okay, you see the standings now. One person at 10, one person at 9, 3 at 8.5, and then a whole bunch of people all the way down to 16th place with 8 out of 11. Let us focus. So we'll know that we're going to see those top 2. So actually, it's kind of ironic. Like, you want to see the best players, but we know that they're going to make it, it seems like. So I almost want to not watch the top game. So if we can see some of these players, let's say in 10th, 11th, 12th place, see if they'll play. But out of respect for the players who are doing the best, I'll stay on this game for a bit. If I'm Karina with the black pieces, I just want to, I think, make a draw. Although there will be a lot of people who can catch up. No, this is a tough call here. If she controls her own destiny, she's in second place. But trying to figure out what score you need to qualify, that's a nightmare. So go Alina, I see. Alina's in fourth place there, tied for third. She is now playing against Valentina Gunina. And knight d7, this is good play. f4, this kind of setup here. So many pieces defending the e5 square. But you give permanent control over a square like e4. But the black knight isn't going there while the white knight can take it. So bishop to b7 or bishop to a6. Bishop a6 is likely going to happen. The a5 has been played. I think queen e2 makes sense. But actually a5 is useful for many reasons. It can allow a bishop trade. It also helps get a head start on a queenside push. With like c4, b5, e4, all the stuff. And bishop a6, actually the white bishop can just retreat. So it's not the end of the world anyway. Goryachkina taking on Vaishali. This looks suspicious. Wait, blacks have a pawn though. How did that pawn go? Somehow white went b4 there. b4, giving up a pawn to play for d4. What? What? You just give up so many pawns. Wow, what a concept. So now it's only one pawn. It was two pawns, but I mean, I'm into this. This is cool. Especially in a blitz game. So takes, e5. This knight wants to get to d6, so knight d2 to c4 makes some sense. But black will castle. Feels like this was a little artificial. Let's go to Alina versus Valentina. Alina Kashnskaya with the white pieces here against Valentina Gunina. The queen and the knight are teaming up well on the e5 pawn. Now this knight's coming to g4, and watch out. Once this knight gets to g4, there's actually big potential of attacks. Let's see if you play a6, knight g4. Your pawn's already under threat, so you probably have queen to d6. But if you play here, I have h5. You were taking here of knight f6 check, so you just have to be a bit careful about some of these options. So h5 was Gunina's choice to say, I'm being careful. I'm just making sure that Alina can't push her own pawn there. Queen g5 at some point can be considered, but I don't like it. The endgame should be good for black with the outside extra pawn. Okay. So I think queen f3 is the next move. Trying to provoke g6 and then play for g4. Seems risky. But you got to risk it to get the biscuit, right? All right, so just looking through these games again. Let's go to this one here where Harika Jonavali with the black pieces. The bishop on d5, but knight b6. These are some strong minor pieces. The rook on f1. White just has way more space, and I think the position is just really a lot better here. I think that you have a position where semi-open file for your rook. Nice minor piece placement. This rook on c7 is awkward. This d5 square is yours permanently. Feels good. Hard to complain about this. Here comes this rook to f1. I like it. And we have... What's this position? So white is... Nope, not up a pawn. But white has this connected pass pawn. And black has an extra pawn on the A through C files, but you can't really make progress here. I covered this B5 square, of course covered the C4 square. But in an endgame, the one thing that I'd be careful about for black is a king dart to B5. With all those compromised light squares, I'm looking for that. But for now, switching the attention over to the king side does make sense. When you play G takes F4 at some point, this pawn, or you play g4 actually. Let's play g4 now. Keep that side of the board closed. But the issue is you may be able to play g4, but black can play c4 and the queen c5 check and then pick up this pawn on c4. So c4 here looks very good. I actually think c4 gives black a nice position, nice chances here. And I think c4 is just strong. c4 takes, check. King maybe towards the center. Here, My rook lands here at this a4 pawn. h6, g4 first. Rook in there, c4. Very good decision. And I'm going to change the game in a sec, but this is a very good choice. Queen takes c4. Trying to go after now white's weak a pawn. This pawn b6 is quite weak, but this bishop has a hard time getting out. You need to jump your bishop rook to b1 in the future. So let's go back to some of these top games. Here we have two knights going after the f7 pawn, but the rook on b7 covers the square. And now h6 is coming? I think white is just much worse. h6 played. Alright, here we go. Take on... You couldn't take on g6. The rook would just go back to the queen side. Now white's worse here. Bishop b4. Alright, a4, a3. That's actually smart. That's really smart. a3, and then you want to get your knight to square like c3. King e7. And I just need to attack this. Knight c3 now. No, you walked into it. Rook a6 is just bishop e7. So just take here and take on a2. Unfortunately for white, this is now just an outside pass pawn that you're going to have to deal with. And you're not going to be able to very successfully. Knight f6. Okay, this makes sense. Bring the king up. Then play knight f6. The bishop on e7 will permanently protect this pawn. Knight f6. No, king g7 is wrong. But it's fine. I think the idea of knight f6 is just not coming to her. So wait, this is pretty annoying. With king f7, bishop f8. Here's bishop f8 now. In 6 seconds for white, even look at the clock. 5, 4, 3, 2, 2.3 seconds. Knight f6. I just think she's not seeing this move. She brings knight to c3, which is fine, but now knight to d1 maybe? Okay, bring the knight to f6, please. Win the h5 pawn. Get your second outside pass pawn. Knight c4. Hitting this pawn, but then rook g3. Keep the king away. King f6 you can play. No, okay, she finally found knight f5. She puts her knight in g7. She's doing the same thing. Oh no, rook g8. Oh, rook g8 was a good move. Just a second ago, there was pieces like this. Rook g8 would have won one of them. Now it's too late. Oh, this pawn though. Oh gosh, a2. Play a2. But you have nothing. You can't accomplish anything. Bishop a3 check, king a1. And now the king's on a1. You actually can't get another check. You need your king. Rush this king here. I don't know if it works, but yeah, you're not on time. Oh my gosh, what a turnaround here. It's still not over. Knight d1. Hit this pawn. Take this pawn. Oh gosh, that's an important pawn. Knight f5. Now black's winning again. King f7. Bishop f4. Bishop e3. Okay, this works too. Bishop g7. Take on d4. h6. Bishop h8. h7. Oh, bishop h8 was probably bad. Knight f5 now. You had to go h7. Tough. This is really tough to play with no time on your clock. Now it's winning for black. Knight f5, good. The bishop will move. King will go back to f6 probably. Oh, that's no. Oh, she's plenty of time on her clock. She gave away her bishop with plenty of time on the clock. Bring the knight to c6. Try to play for a win here. You can't lose with your knight against the rook. They made a draw. That game was just bonkers. So here, where am I looking? So from the very start of this, when this knight was here, you played knight f6, you win the h5 pawn. And then you just win the game with your other outside pawn. But what all this happened, which was craziness. Wait, I just skipped a moment again. Here, rook g8 would have won the game because you have two minor pieces on the same rank and you can't protect them. But what happened was still pretty nuts. And white now has stolen his pawn. The problem is you can't do anything. You can't dislodge the king from here. So you want to, and, well, we're getting to the last round, so I can't even talk about that game anymore. Let me see these standings. 10.5, 9.5. Wait, some people just made a quick draw, I think. Is that what just happened? I see 9.5 to 13 for 2 people, which means they probably made a quick draw, which is kind of nerve-wracking if your tiebreaks aren't great. So we'll see if they actually qualify numbers 4 and 5 there, 9.5 to 13. Oi. Okay. So Daisy Corey with the black pieces. She has only 9, as if that's not a great score. She has 9 out of 12, and her opponent has already qualified, clearly, and probably has already qualified as the number 1 overall seed. So this game is unimportant to her, but very important to Daisy Corey here. And if she draws, she's towing that line between making the top 8 or losing out in tiebreak. So she might need to try to win this game. I don't know what her tiebreaks are. I'm actually can look at this. Her tiebreaks are decent, pretty good, but you never know how the other players will do in the last round. So she's just playing now. Her position is solid. All 8 pawns exist for both sides. I think that white is going to consider playing g4. And you play g4 just to open up the black king. Right? When you play g4, your bishop on d3 is feeling happy. And you can eventually move your king. Try to put a rook on the g file. This bishop on c6 is not very good. It's behind its own pawn, which is annoying, to say the least. So white's bishop is better. This rook can come up into the game as well. This pawn e6, you can't push forward. I can even consider taking that. I wouldn't take it, I don't think, but I can consider it. Actually, maybe I would take it. If I take on c5, the only way to try to attack is queen f8, and then at b4. Then after a5, a3. After a takes, rook a3, your rook c1. Now I have a connected passed pawn. That feels like it was unfortunately a wrong decision. Queen d2. If rook a2, there's rook c2. Just to make sure that the second rank is protected. So I see Karina and Vaishali, they finished as well. So they go to 10 out of 13. They both move on into the knockout bracket, that's for sure. And Daisy Corey is struggling here now down a pawn, trying to qualify. Let's look at Valentina Godina with 9 points. Taking on, I believe this is Anastasia Bodnaruk. It is. So queen h5. Ooh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. That's a big attack. Bishop h8 would not be particularly good because rook g3 check. Feels wrong. So what can you do? I guess you're losing this pawn? But that looks really bad if you lose that. I don't see anything. Rook f7 taking bishop h6. Check here, bishop h6, going for queen h8 check. Yeah, that's a problem. Because queen h8 check is a threat picking up this rook. And you can actually play queen h8 right now. All things considered, this might have been the best practical try by Gunina, because it seemed like her king was in grave danger. Now her king is safer, and is she even? She's down 1 pawn, but the attack is still strong. You can bring this rook to f1 to gang up on the pinned rook. This rook can come to h7 with problems here. Yeah, this is not looking too good. And let's keep on going. I'm just keep an eye on some of these other games. It seems like queen f4. Wait, check. King here. Trade queens. Take on b7. This is the one hope for black in this past pawn. So kind of like rook f8, e3, e2. But you need to make all those moves happen. If you could play e3 next, you'd feel good about it. But after e3, probably some kind of g3. Some counterplay chances. But nothing more than that. Good move, h3. Really good move, h3. g3, I was thinking that in a situation like this, the second rook comes down and the white king starts to feel a little bit unsafe. So the rook's on e4. Trade on e5. How about rook e7? Good move. Okay, how do you win this game? Trading will not do that. This actually is a big problem with the king coming into d3. So what do you do here? What does one do? Rook to d7. And rook d7 attacks this pawn. King comes back. And white has plenty of extra time. So you need to figure this moment out. Rook e7. King f4 again. Oh, that king is so active. King is trying to go to d3. Oh, king d3. No, no, no. Oh, no. This is how this game turns around. That was bad. Rook here. Or you can take on a4, but rook f4. Check, and then rook f2. This is actually just like how Nim won the game against Hutch yesterday in the PogChamps. And it's not even a joke. That game was actually very well played. And he brought his king in that game and then tried to get his rook d1, rook d2. Look at this. It's just like that game from yesterday. And Valentina Gunina goes from a tough position now to winning, it feels like, after rook d2. And you're going to have to take on d2 twice, sacrifice your rook here, and hope that your g and h pawns help you survive, but the king comes back so quickly. King comes at 4, or the king's coming this way, king f6. King stays in front of the pawns. The rook will go over to the queen side to mop up the rest. And yeah, king h7. Wow, what a turn of events here. And looking at the standings, a lot of people on 9.5 out of 13. So Gunina is going to leapfrog all of them. Nice try here to get just push the pawn, hope that Gunina doesn't react well. But no, here just winning a5, winning g5. 18.8 seconds left. That was a turnaround. Gunina survives, and not just survives, she ends up winning that game. And, well, we see all the people there with 9.5 points. And some of it will have worse tiebreaks than others, of course. We'll see at the end because the standings will change based on other people's games. So, rook h5 check. Okay, just try to bring the king up. King e2, good move. King f1. Nice move, rook f5 check. g2, check. King g1. You're going to build a bridge. Oh. You need to be careful about this. Rook f7. Check on e7. Okay. Should check on e7. King f1. The king f1 was winning. Okay, good that they weren't playing for qualification because king f1 is winning here because after rook takes g2 check, the only way to protect your rook is to move the king over, and then you have this check here. So we have the final results. You see that, well, first place we knew about from the very beginning. We have Vaishali and Karina just there with 10 points. Oh, as well as Valentina Gunina. And then 8th place. Is that Daisy Corey there in 8th place? Barely sneaking in there. And it looks like, unfortunately, 3 players with 9.5 out of 13 were left off. So, oh, and Alina Kashinskaya didn't make it with 9 out of 13. That's unfortunate for her. I think she lost her game against Valentina Gunina, if I'm not mistaken, and then ended up out of the field. So I'm going to take a quick break because we are just going to get the bracket set up. We're going to make sure that all the players enter a call so that they're being monitored. They will be on camera, and just to ensure that everything is going smoothly. It is. Everything has been to this point, so that's great. But it just to also be able to get their cameras on so I can bring them onto the live show and show how they're reacting. It's tough playing blitz And with 3 minutes in the clock and only 1 second increment, you're under serious pressure. So take a quick break. We'll be back with the knockout. Don't go anywhere because they're a knockout. 8 players move on. We will have the knockouts. The top 2 from the knockouts will qualify for the Women's Speeches Championship. So stay tuned, everybody. We'll be back in a few. Okay, everybody, we're back here getting set for the knockout. There were 8 players have qualified. You see their names on screen as well as their usernames on chess.com. They're just getting set up in a call, and the action will take place shortly. So these matchups are particularly interesting because in first place we had Win Pham, and she dominated the event. I mean, she really played so excellently throughout the whole thing. 11 out of 13. That's a score that, I mean, if you ask anybody, pretty much anybody in the world going into a tournament like this, how would you feel with 11 out of 13? You say, please sign me up. And so she finished in first. She gets number 1 seed. Daisy Corey was the last person in at 8th place. 9 after 13 to get there. Valentina Gunina, I know she has many fans in the chat. I've seen people rooting for her throughout the day. Yes, chat, I've been looking at you all. But she is there. She got 4th place thanks to her last round victory. She was in some trouble in that game, but she managed to come out on top. So Valentina Gunina, as the 4 seed, she takes on Petra Pop as the 5 seed. And so that's going to be an interesting one too. Petra Pop played very well. So this is going to be a really fun 2 matches, right? So you need to make it to the finals. Typically there'll be 3 matches, right? 8 goes to 4, 4 goes to 2, 2 goes to 1. But the top 2 finishers qualify for the Women's Speeches Championship. And so the last matchup, Vaishali versus Goryachkina. Vaishali played very well, especially in time trouble. That was very impressive to me, where she had numerous games where she just looked like her back was against the wall. She had a couple seconds left, and yet she bounced back. She had 1 win and 1 draw, and yeah, that was to her favor. So give me 1 second here as I wait for this to take place. So the players are all getting set. They're just chatting with them, making sure all is ready. And we should have liftoff shortly. So there are these 4 matches that you see in front of you. I'm excited for them. I hope you are as well. And we're just going to see if Goryachkina, for example, if she can qualify. Yesterday, she got eliminated. She didn't make it through, and she is probably the favorite on paper based on her classical chess rating. But Gunina, in particular, has had great results in Rapid and Blitz tournaments. So she also finished 2nd place last year in the Women's Speed Chess Championship to Alina Danilian. So she, of course, has a chance. And actually, when I look across the bracket, I think that Goryachkina and Gunina, without any disrespect meant towards any of the other players, because I think they are the favorites, that they are probably particularly happy that they're on the opposite side of the bracket from each other, because the top 2 qualify, right? If it's the only one person, then you're going to play that person regardless if you're both doing well. But because they're on opposite sides of the bracket here, that means that Gunina and Goryachkina will never have to face off if they are the players to win. They are by no means guaranteed to win their matches. Goryachkina and Gunina both lost matches yesterday, but I think that they're probably happy about that. And so we're going to see mini matches. It's going to be a whirlwind. And yeah, I mean, Daisy Corey, very strong player from Peru. We have Win Pham from Vietnam. So very international event. That's also really cool to see. And about chess in general is you have players here from Vietnam, Peru, Russia, 2 players. We have Hungary. We have 3 players from Russia. I missed the 3rd Russian flag. Mongolia and India. That's awesome. And actually, growing up, I loved that about chess, where I could play in tournaments and I would just see countless flags. And it just goes to show that the games are played all across the world. And Mungzul, she's from Mongolia. So just everything getting set in with the players. Should be going in about a minute, I'm being told. Just setting everything up with the players with such an international field. There are going to be some language barriers, but just making sure that everybody's aware of the tournament situation. Much more important that all the players are in the know than maybe starting, in 1 minute rather than 2 minutes. But it's very good that there are so many staff members behind the scenes working on it, and the players are being informed exactly what the format is so that they don't have to worry about anything in particular. So we are just waiting here real quick. And if there's a tie, there's an Armageddon. And we had one of those yesterday. It's 5 minutes for white, 4 minutes for black, and then a draw gets black the victory. So just bear with us as everybody gets set. Good matchups though. I don't know which one is my favorite matchup. Probably the top one. WinFam playing against Daisy Corey. I think that I feel less familiar with WinFam. She just dominated this tournament with 11 out of 13. So I'm particularly excited to see if she can continue that in a match format. It's with everything on the line, just 2 games, mini match. It's a whole different dynamic. And let's see. The players. They're chatting. I can see them chatting. And it's funny. I have a behind the scenes look that y'all unfortunately don't have access to, but they're just setting up. They have screen shares going on. They have talking through the regulations with the players just to take every single precaution necessary. And FIDE and chess.com, they're in coordination with one another, just making sure that there's not even close to a hint of suspicion. Not that there ever is. In yesterday, for example, none of that. But it just makes sure that everybody can see what's going on. Everyone knows what's happening. And in fact, one of the winners yesterday, she had the best quality. Like her camera was over her, like going into her screen, so you could see exactly what she was doing and watching her play on chess.com. Alrighty, so we are getting closer. I'm sure that the players themselves, like after playing 13 rounds of 3-minute blitz, you probably just have this adrenaline rush that you don't want to let up on because you're just so focused, you're so ready to play the next game that then you have a break and you're kind of like, wait, I have to get back in that mindset again. Because I know for me personally that if I don't play blitz for a little bit and then I get into a 3-minute game, I'm a little casual, not playing as quickly as perhaps I should. And the next thing I know, I have 45 seconds left and my opponent has a minute and a half. I'm like, wait, why am I down to this little time here? So it's going to be starting soon, everybody. And I can see behind the scenes what's going on here. Getting close. 2 game mini matches. Players chatting with each other. And we should have liftoff soon, hopefully. My pleasure. I'm glad everybody's tuning in. This is such a great event. So personally, I love commentating on blitz games because they're happening at such a rapid pace. I guess it's such a blitz pace. Good chess joke. But they're happening so quickly, all the moves, that it's often hard to dissect what's going on. So I try to help people, figure out what's happening here. And this event is fun. You get everything you could ask for. You have blitz chess. You have knockouts. You have everything on the line for a chance to qualify for the Women's Speed Chess Championship here. There's a lot at stake, and it's a lot of fun for me. No dabs happening. Let's see. Yeah, just me and the chat. Master, Grandmaster, you can follow the players individually by typing /follow and then the player's username. So that would help you. And they're just talking through the players. I can see it happening. But I'm trying to look at these matchups. I'm trying to see if there's any clear favorite to me. I just on paper, Gunina and Goryachkina are so highly rated that I have to give them the nod. But it's hard because Vaishali, she played so well in this event. And she's also pretty highly rated herself. But Goryachkina, to me, still the favorite, despite the fact that she lost her match yesterday. I would have to think that she is the person with the best chance. And that top matchup between Wenfam and Daisy Corey, I have no idea. I think that's a toss-up to me. The matches will start as soon as the players are ready. This is no one's fault in particular. There are just, as you see the flags on the screen, there are players from many different countries, which means that not everyone is going to speak the same language, which means as you get through the regulations and all the necessary requests, it does take some time. And obviously, we would like the games to begin as soon as possible, but I think we should show respect to the players, and that's exactly what the staff is doing. They're making sure that all the players are perfectly informed as best as possible, and so that's what's being worked on. And all right, so just kind of check in with the team. Just checking in here, everybody. Vaishali is your favorite. Okay. On hold for a sec. And by the way, everybody, because after this event, there's much more chess to be watched. So we'll have the knockout here. That's, of course, not going anywhere. We will be covering that shortly. But today is the final day of PogChamps. So for those of you who've been following the event from the very beginning, it's the last day. The championship match will be between Voyboy and Hutch. And then in the constellation bracket, first there's XQC versus Ludwig, and the winner plays Moist Critical. But at long last, we do have liftoff here. We have the players. And let's get ready to rumble, as they say. So we have here Wenfam here on camera. She's taking on Daisy Corey. She's the white pieces. And she plays this kind of London system, right? Bishop on f4, keeping the structure very compact. This pyramid pawn structure gives white a good center. And black has challenged the center with c5, but that doesn't break it. CD out as e takes d4, not the biggest deal. So black can consider trying to play for e5 in the future, but that has inherent risk, because if you play e5, bishop h2 right now is probably the best move. Retreat this bishop, that way e5, e4 doesn't happen. But if you play e5, the pawn on d6 now becomes weak. She starts with bishop h2, and if you play e5, you just have to watch out for e4, so she takes once on e5. Good move, knight takes e5. Because if you took with the pawn on e5, you get cramped. Here, on the other hand, bishop a6 is the move I would consider, but you can't play that with your knight on d2 hanging, because the queen needs to stay here. So bishop a6 would have been a really big blunder, because once we have this happen, queen takes d2, down goes your knight. So e4 played. Still great control over the light squares on the queen side. I can play a4, I can play a5, and eventually I would consider playing bishop a6, but I had to play rook f1 to d1, just played. Knight f4 doesn't scare me. I'll take, you have double pawns there. My pawn e4 is protected, but that may be something that black feels like she has to go for, is a knight f4, because otherwise what's her plan? She doesn't have too many options here, just because white doesn't have any real weaknesses. I'm thinking a4, I'm thinking a5, that still feels right. Knight f4, you still take on f4. Okay, you can land a queen there at the end of this all, but what's the good of having a queen on f4? The pawn e4 is defended, and watch out, if the queen lands on f4, knight d6 happens. I would be taking this quite quickly. Then they take with the pawn, though. So she's spending time, so it's good that she's spending her time here, because some of the players have played too quickly in critical moments. She chooses queen f3. I don't really like giving up the light square bishop. I actually don't find this bishop too valuable. So now she's going to drop her bishop back to f1. Now that she has the opportunity to keep it, she should. Because if the knight on f4 ever moves, the pawn on e5 gets in trouble. So I'm going to keep an eye on this game. Going to move on for a quick sec to one of the other games, but we'll keep an eye on all of them as best as we can. So we have this game here between Karina Ambartsumova taking on Mugzal Termunk, and this position is kind of crazy over here with these pawns on c5 and d5. This pawn on c5 is under attack, but the knight on d7 protects it. You may want to play bishop b5 in the next move if you get the chance. You're kicking this knight, and then this pawn on c5 is under attack. And here you see that there's also this pawn a5 needing the rook's defense. So there are some opportunities really for both here. And we'll bring up Karina on camera. She's very focused here. This pawn on c5 still defended by this knight on d7. This knight on d7 is kind of a hero. These minor pieces are really doing a good job of defending these pawns, even though they look like they're a bit loose. And this queen, I'm looking at the queen on c6, not many moves of safety. Queen d6, queen a6, queen e7, that takes away d6 from you. It also puts another defender on c5. So queen c7, this queen can run back to a square like g3 if it's detected. Also is threatening the pawn a5. So a4, good move by black here. We're just trying to challenge this pawn structure. If you take, I take with my rook. Your pawn a2 is weak. Also, if your pawn on b3 has a capture, now my pawn on c5 will going to be able to go c4 without being captured. So I'm trying to figure out knight e5. Uh-oh. Knight e5, this knight needs to stay here, defend this rook. And knight c6 is another threat, hitting the queen and hitting the rook another time. And if I take on d7, your d5 pawn falls. So this is actually a really tough tactical spot here. And queen d8 takes on d7. Oh, bishop b5 first. That's such a good move. Now you're going to take on d7, take on d5 once the bishop takes on d7, and down goes a rook. So it looks like Karina Ambartsumova is taking this first game. If I am playing with the black pieces here, I'm trying to figure out what to do. Rook a8 protects the rook, but bishop d7, rook takes d5. Thank you for your free pawn here. And it's not like black had any good choice to speak of, but it's just a very loose position. These hanging pawns, they're not protecting each other. Anytime you push one of them, if you were able to, then this square d4 becomes under white's control. So having the hanging pawn structure is quite difficult to handle, and I think just taking this on d7 is a good choice, but she's thinking here. She's trying to think about which endgame she wants, most likely. I really like the capture, though. And it's looking good for Karina. So let me look at, okay, this other game, she takes with on d7 with the knight, which means her bishop's under attack. Rook takes c5. We're going to get into a pawn-up rook endgame, but if we get there, that's actually good drawing chances for black. Rook n4 versus rook n3 is a theoretical draw. So I'm going to take us away from here because this game is absolutely bonkers. We have a position with white's king on g3, black's king on f8. Look at this pawn structure here. It's looking menacing, but isn't knight e4 check, just next move, going to hurt this king? The rook on b2 is well positioned here. I think that Gunina could be in some trouble, and it's just a tough position to have with your king all the way out here. We'll bring Petra Pap on camera just to... Oh, there she is. And knight e4 check, hitting this king. And this bishop is also under attack. So you have to go king f3, but then knight g5 is a fork. Uh-oh. That looks like it's going to be winning for Petra Pap here. Take the rook, take the bishop. And there's no checkmate attack that I see here. You're up a full rook right now. f6 is a good move. It shuts the queen off. Queen takes here. The king goes to e8, I guess. Now rook g5. But then queen d6 check. But this is not game over. This is actually not game over at all. Somehow this king is finding itself in a tough spot. Queen d6. But after queen d6, you should have king g8. Yes, run away from the bishop. It's a hard move to play. But because rook takes d7, you can with rook takes e3 with check. And then you move the queen away. Wait, but then there's rook d8 check. Hold up. Oh, the queen takes f6. You're able to take this pawn. So I would try to play a move like knight f5, and that's what was just played. Because if you take on f5, then the queen protects the f6 pawn. So rook takes here. Pawn takes g4 check. And there's a king h4. You're barely holding on here. But 18 seconds left with this complex of a position. I'm not sure. And there's some Rook d8. Uh-oh. Is it that simple? Just give up your queen and then push this pawn through? It's starting to look that simple. Queen d7 though. Then rook f8. Wow, you just put your rook on f8. Oh, that's dangerous move because checking queen here. Oh, promote to a knight. Promote to a knight. Promote to a knight. Checkmate. Promote to a knight. Did she know to promote to a knight? She did it. She didn't have auto queen on. Rook h4 checkmate. Oh, she didn't miss. She missed mate in 1, but she found mate in 2. It's okay. She got the checkmate. That is sick. You promote to a knight. Oh, the game's gone. Here it is. You promote to a knight because the king has to come back. Rook h4 checkmate. If you promote to a queen, then queen takes f7. There are some threats. You have rook g7 to win, but there are some threats. That was really nice win. You don't get to see promoting to a knight very often. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. So we have Goryachkina lost game 1 to Vaishali. I missed that one. Let's change our camera. Let's change our player here to see their matchup. 4 matches going on at the same time. We'll see how Vaishali can handle this one because, well, she is in the lead right now of this match. And as she plays here, it's a position where she feels comfortable. She's put this bishop on g7 throughout this event, and she's focused. She's locked in. She's ready to take down her more highly rated opponent in classical chess. But in blitz chess, you see Vaishali is ranked 2654. Clearly a strong online player, no doubt. And so bishop h3, bishop moves back to h1. Goryachkina wants to keep this bishop in the long diagonal. Black would like to trade off those pieces because if that bishop is taken, then the white king feels less comfortable. So this bishop on h1 is a very good piece. And right now, only one match had a draw. That was Karina and Mungzul. And here, well, Goryachkina is spending some time, plays d4. So if takes, knight takes, your bishop feels stronger all the way here on h1. And it's easy to forget about that bishop. In all of these variations, the bishop will be strong. But because it's sitting in the corner, there are moments where you just kind of forget about it. But I don't think that Vaishali will. She just needs to make sure that she has her attention squarely on this piece. And this bishop on h3, it pushed the bishop back into the corner here, but it's not actually doing anything. It's on a short diagonal. Normally, you'd want to line up a queen with that bishop to deliver a checkmate on a square like g2, but you're not getting anywhere near there thanks to this bishop on h1. So I tend to like white's position. I don't always see the natural placement for black's pieces. White can play queen to d2, rook to d1, even think about pawn e4. And yeah, rook c1 played. Very good move. There are sometimes you want to play knight d5 and then trade on this. Here, get the c pawn to d5, gain some space, and more control of the board. So I think that so far, Vaishali is doing okay, but her time management is problematic right now. Goryachkina up nearly a full minute now. So Goryachkina is doing the right thing. She's keeping tension. She's well ahead in the clock. Going to switch over to a new game for now. Going to go over to the game between Gunina and Pep because what is happening here... So in this one, Gunina has an extra exchange, but the position looks very shaky. So I'd be quite worried about this position for Gunina. And she's so focused, trying to figure out a way to survive first and foremost, and then play for a win, because the king is not very safe on e8. But that said, oh, that's a nice move. This rook is stuck. That might just end it. Actually, where does it go? King to d7, but take this rook, take this pawn, and what is white going to be up? White's going to be up 2 pawns there with an attack on this king. This looks very strong. Queen takes f7. Next, bishop f4. Try to get after this knight in e7. Actually, rook takes e7 is a threat because this rook is hanging here. So rook... I don't know where you move your rook. Like rook e8 just to be defensive. And then even queen e6 check. This is... Unfortunately for Gunina, this is going to result in a second defeat, I feel like. Just plenty of time for white. The king is out in the open. And now you're already down 2 pawns. This pawn can be captured. The knight's going to be pinned all over the place. Yeah, unfortunately for her, this is looking like a problem. So I'm going to go to the matchup between Daisy Corey and Wen Fem here, because we have a position where white is going for an attack. Bishop takes g6 possibilities. And black has this great knight on b4, but, which is stronger, the attack? And I'm looking at potential with knight to g5, queen h4, going for a checkmate. And if that doesn't happen, then isn't the position just going to be better for black because of this control on b4, this bishop on b1 not doing too much? Still looking at sacrifices, but this queen is very close. So knight e5 is a good move. Should bring more pieces into the attack. And going to bring up here Daisy Corey. She has a cool background. Really cool background, honestly. And she's bringing these pieces here. f5 doesn't work because I take this pawn. So queen f6. I want to play rook d3. Can't. This knight's on b4. Maybe rook to c1. There it is. Rook c3. Rook f3. Here comes the rook left. Queen g7 is smart because now f5 is a threat. So you have to be careful. f5 couldn't be played for the last bunch of moves. But now that the queen's on g7, f5 will hit the queen and the bishop at the same time. So that being said, do I put the bishop back on b1? Bishop back to b1, you allow c5. So you don't want to put the bishop there, allow this one to open. The queen hits the knight on e5, so bishop f3. I think it's a smart move. Bishop 8, I also think that's a smart move. And maybe c5 here. You tend not to want to give the d5 square to black's knight, but if you play c5, that bishop on a8 looks particularly bad. So g3 played to trade bishops on a8, king g2, rook h1, go for an attack. c5, I think the biggest issue is losing control. Oh, take on a8, knight to d7. Whoa, in-between move. In-between move, that was nice. Because if rook takes here, knight d7, rook d8, knight takes b6, and then I hit your rook, I'm going to take on c5 next. Just pawn takes d4. Instant replay. So this knight's under attack, this bishop's under attack. This knight can go take on g6 if you want. You can take on d4. I think rook takes d4 and queen takes e5 when we play. So knight f3. So rook takes here. Now rook takes d4. Next move, rook to d1. So I think Daisy Corey handled this quite well, taking over the d file. Rook to d6. And now her g3 move in particular will come in handy because the king can go to g2, where it'll be safe. Whereas if this pawn were on g2, if any check happened on the first rank, you'd have to go to h2, where there's going to be a bunch of checks. So can you just trade and take on b6? She probably doesn't want to bring this queen out. So she's probably thinking queen e4, and if knight f3, so queen e4, knight takes, queen takes, and just keep this queen stuck for one move longer. But she takes, and with queen d4. Wow. Okay, this is, I think, a good move because the endgames are all going to be better for white. You have this backward pawn on b6. Black is stuck sitting passively. Rook to d7 keeps the king away. Then bring your king in. I think that white has good chances here. Because the weak pawn here is on the same line as the enemy weak pawn. And white's rook is active. Black is very passive. I see Vaishali won her game again against Goryachkina. So she wins her match 2-0. Ooh, rook a7. Looks like it's going to be Daisy's game. Rook b7. Play rook b7, I think. And rook c6. The problem with rook c6 is you're protecting b6, but the king can't take on here without losing this pawn. But king d4. King g4. Play king g4. And you have rook f3. King g4 is a necessity now. Same idea, but I think this is a worse execution because the king would have already been up the board. She's retreating. Rook e3 check now. But king b4. How is she going to win this game? If the rook leaves the 6th rank, you have rook to e6. Oh, pre-move. That's probably not a good pre-move. But she's going to get away with it. She gets away with it. g6. Wait, the king's cut off. But you should try to stalemate yourself. Eventually play a4. King a2. a3. Here it goes. g7. Take it. And then a2. This is a known draw. Wow. So unfortunately for Daisy Corey, it looks like this one is not going her way barely. It looked like she had it. Some disappointment registering on her face, but she'll have more chances as there will be more qualifiers. So after this, well, we still have one game between Gunina. Okay, Gunina now is what, down a piece for a pawn, and should be. Oh wait, hold up. I had the board reversed. Gunina was black and was up in piece for pawn, but lost in time. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, the bishop c7 lost on time. Uh-oh. To be fair, the game should have been a draw, which means that Gunina was going to be eliminated anyway. But, wow, I wasn't expecting that, that's for sure. Oof. So we have one more match still to be played because it's a tie between Karina Amartsumova and Mungzul Turmunk. So I'm waiting for that one. That will be an Armageddon. We'll see who gets white, who gets black. White has 5 minutes. Black has 4 minutes, but has draw odds. And those draw odds become very important. Because, well, if you play well, if you don't get into too much danger on the clock, all you need is a draw, and you win the match. And there is just going to be one game in the tiebreaker. So, WinFam, Petrapap, Vaishali. You know what that just happened? They didn't actually hear me because they can't hear me. But I was saying how Goryachkina and Gunina were the favorites, and then they were promptly swept. That's what you call commentator's curse, right? You talk about an event happening, and then immediately the other thing happens. So, unfortunately for those two Russian players, they were eliminated. Karina Amartsumova still has a chance here, waiting for that game to take place. And 5 minutes for white, 4 minutes for black. Draw odds. And let's see. So just I'm going to try to see what's going on here. So getting rid of some of the players from the call because they've been eliminated, and going through, Karina Amartsumova will have white in the game. So she will take the white pieces. That means that Mungzul Turmunk will have draw odds. It's so hard to know which is better. I think a lot of the top players prefer to have black in those kind of games, but the extra minute is so valuable. It really is hard to evaluate the trade-off because players have different styles, and if you feel like you're very solid and you rarely lose, then you probably want to take the black pieces. But if you feel like you would have good chances to win because you're an aggressive player and you have sharp openings that are tailor-made just for a blitz game, then you might take white, saying, I have the extra time. So we have liftoff here. We have this position now opening. There is Mungzul Turmunk. We have her on screen. It must be pretty late where she's playing from, and it's quite dark. So she castles, playing quickly so far in the opening. And what's going on here? So b6, standard. Try to get bishop to b7. Oftentimes knight b5. Going for c7. C takes d, knight takes d5. At the very least protects c7. And now the knight's kicked back. So the knight on a6 is a bit awkwardly placed, but it also helped black develop because now rook c8 and c5 is what I would immediately do. So it seems like she wasn't phased at all by this odd knight jump. Perhaps it is backfiring for Amartsumova because her position looks good in the sense that it looks like any sort of traditional queen's pawn game, but it does feel like she's down a couple tempi, and that's what happens when you go knight to b5 back to c3. Black is fully developed, all pieces are out. Black is castled, white hasn't moved the bishop out, but the reason why I would say white is still completely fine and maybe has preferable chances, and it's not the clock because the clock is about to be close to equal, it's that white has more space. And you may put this bishop on f3 so that if c5 you can't take on c4 with this bishop hanging behind it. So there's a lot of tension here. Good control of the center, but time, it's about to even in time. Mungzul playing so quickly. Wow, she's ready for this. And What is working? H3, calm move, C5 played in 1 second. So white spent 22 seconds, black moved in 1 second. And now you have to win with white, and you're down on the clock. I would take on here, take on C4, good move. Now this knight's coming to D5. And then this rook is going to be very happy. So knight D5 for sure. H6 first. I think knight to D5. But is there some tactics? No, I don't see any tactics. Knight E8. Protecting the knight F6, but that feels a bit too passive for my liking. She's just trying to protect F6, got her queen out the way. Bishop takes A3 is no longer a threat because of knight B5. So I'll show that, knight to B5, hitting the queen, hitting the bishop. And if you took on A3, the knight would have been lost. Okay, the bishop drops back to G3, the bishop drops. Now I'm starting to like white's position again. Actually, where's this queen going? This queen is really in harm's way. I'd go rook Fe1 and go knight takes F7. This is a problem. Oh, okay, look at this move. I don't know if it actually works, but takes, check, king F8. It feels so close. I need my bishop on A2. She does it. She's going to put bishop G6 in there. What am I talking about? But I thought, no. Here, bishop G6. I have the square covered, at least, so I can play queen to D7. I'm not sure this is going to work out the way she wants it to. She has to take on F7. If black doesn't take on F7, you're just hopeless. So my point is that either you're going to lose right away or you're going to end up losing anyway. So you might as well just take the knight on F7 and do it much more quickly than 30 seconds. So king F8. So queen D7 played. Yeah, I don't know. This knight is very strong here as a defender. I don't see it. Bishop takes D6. I can just take on E6 to trade queens, or take on D6 back, and my queen protects F7. So she went for the knight sack. Black thought, said, okay, it's happening. Let me compose myself, and now knight C4. This queen is not very helpful anymore. It's closed off thanks to the rook and knight coordinating here. And if you give black a couple more moves, I'm thinking knight to D5, bishop F6, and get everything out of dodge. So knight D5 here. Then there may be some kind of rook. I do have to be careful of rook lift. And queen C6, that threatens a little checkmate on G2. Is D5 possible? I'm looking for it. D5, knight takes D5. Yeah, probably black gets away with it. So if knight D5... Oh, but there might be some knight takes D5, and then bishop takes G7, but this bishop on G6 is hanging. And if you go bishop E4, I have knight takes C3, hitting the queen. Wait, but bishop E4 takes. This knight, I think, is just trapped out here, but this bishop's under attack. Ah, it's a complicated position. Bishop E4, good move. Good move. And you played in 18 seconds. Would have liked to play it more quickly, but bishop takes... She took on C3, but rook takes D1 now. No, this unfortunately turned south very quickly. Rook takes E1, and after rook takes 6, what's the material count? Black has 2 rooks. Oh, wait, this rook was hanging, but she didn't take it right away. Uh-oh, I totally forgot that the bishop can move backwards. That's on me. But if we look at this position now, it's a rook and bishop and knight against a queen. Rook F6. And if F4, you take on B4 and then go rook to D6. Yeah, this is actually still very bad for white. So even though the rook on E1 was lost, oh, you can't go king F1 because knight to D2. Now this is a problem. This is a big problem. And with draw odds, you don't even need to win this game, but it looks like black is just winning. I guess G4 can be played. Wait, doesn't that walk into checkmate? Check and mate. Checkmate. Wow. So a win there for Mukzil Turmunk. She moves on to the semifinals. That was mean, a pretty hectic game, but ever since knight takes f7, I know I recommended the move, or I said it was possible. The move happened, and then queen takes e6, and you play for checkmate. But once this queen just simply slid to d7, this square is under control. I would love to trade queens. And then around here, I mean, bishop e4, knight takes c3, bishop takes c6. That was the move to play. Because after knight takes a2, bishop takes b7, this rook is in trouble. And if we trade rooks here and trade some more, well, then once we get to here, I have bishop to d5 kind of ideas. Oh, my bishop's hanging on e5, so I can't do that. Yeah, just not quite there. So we're about to get the semi-finals. Let me transition here. Okay. So we have this matchup's going. It's going to be Mungsul versus Vaishali, and it is going to be Petrov versus the #1 overall player, Wen Fan. So let me make sure I have all the players on follow. FH2411 username. Cool. So I have them followed. Crazy, right? Crazy. Now we just have the semifinals matchup, but it's really the final because it's just two different matches. The winner of each match qualifies for the next leg of the women's speed chess championship. They make it through, so they don't have to play on any of the other qualifiers. And here we see Latau Wen Fan with the white pieces taking on Petrov, and then we have the other match between Mungsul and Vaishali. So two very good matchups here, four determined players. We will start with this matchup that we have in front of us. And, well, we see that white here, she's very focused. We have her on camera now. She was a4, so she continues to play these solid positions without creating tension too early in the opening. So she has 2 minutes and 59 seconds. She's moving instantly, practically every move. And now knight e4, because with the black pieces, Petrov was probably like, oh, it feels like I'm not getting enough. And now knight g5 happens. Wait a second. How are you protecting this? f5, queen b3 check. You have to go queen to d5. So you can block. You get away with it. But you have to be alert for these kind of things here. So f3 was chosen instead. Didn't want to trade the queens. That makes sense. Because if the queens were traded, then after f3, we'll have a massive pawn center here. You don't want to deal with that. So e takes f3. Take back with the pawn is fine. This knight's coming to f4 at some moment soon. Bishop takes. I think e5 looks good now. The one problem with e5 is the bishop is kind of stuck protecting h6. So it starts with g5, which threatens g4. And sort of sacrifices aren't going to work out, doesn't feel like. So black has not developed the entire queen side. And I guess it's not entirely necessary just yet. But that bothers me. Like, do I need to get these pieces out? I feel like I'm not doing anything. Where's this knight going to go? Is it going to go d7 to f6? Okay, knight d7 was played. And I'm going to tune in quickly to flash the other board here. A sharps the sun with the kings on d7. And the knight retreats. This pawn is hanging. Interesting game. So we have two interesting games. I'm going to go back to the other game, and we'll focus more on Vaishali versus Mungsul Turmunks shortly. But here, I just saw the f4 move was played, and this is starting to look... If I can get e5 in, why didn't she play e5 there? She allowed black to do so. Playing e5 makes this pawn very hard to protect and keeps everything closed. By allowing e5 for black, now my knight wants to land on e5, so rook g1, pinning his bishop. Probably don't want to take here. Queen takes d4. Puts pressure on the piece. Knight g4 now is a threat. Coming after h6, the bishop is pinned on g7. Actually, this is maybe just good for white still. So, queen h4 chosen here. I think rook to g2 is always possible. Plays knight to g4. That also makes sense, but where's the knight going from here? e5 is under attack, so I'm looking at h5, but then there's knight h6 check. Oh, that's actually really a problem. h5 is tempting to try to boot the knight backwards, but the knight goes into h6 and then into f5. So just take back with a pawn here. You have a big center if you take back. And this still is looking good for white in my eyes. So knight f6, all right. I'm looking knight e5 now. Bringing this pony into g6 where it hits the rook. Oh gosh, and queen b3 check is a new threat. This rook is still pinning this bishop. Knight g6 not only forks the queen and the rook, but attacks f4. This is a big problem. Hard to deal with. Very hard to deal with. So the queen h3 was played with knight g6 to take on f4 with a tempo. Right? Because once you put the knight on g6 and take on f4, the queen will be under attack on h3. So I really like to move knight to g6. You have to worry about your king, of course. The queen went down to h3 to put pressure on the king. Also, rook a3. If I get my rook to a3, once my bishop moves out the way, your queen is under attack on h3. So bishop d2. It's like almost too calm for my liking. The position may still be excellent, but I don't quite see why bishop d2 is necessary. Because the rook doesn't want to slide over to c1. The rook would probably prefer to be on a3. So she's just going to protect her center. All right, well, let's look at the other game because, and this one is pretty interesting. Black is up a pawn, but the king is here in the center on d7, which means that, whoa, knight takes e6 played, and the point is after king takes e6, g takes f5 check, the bishop on e4 is pinned, so I'm winning this bishop right there on e4. So the rook moved over to c8, but that's not what you wanted to play. I know you're attacking c2, but you just lost your pawn e6. And what now? Rook c1, there's bishop c3 coming. Are the tables turning? Is it actually a position where all of a sudden this king on b1 is in some trouble? Wow. Wow. This, I mean, I think rook takes e4. Oh, all right. So bishop c3 now is possible. But bishop c3, there's queen h6. It's not like the game ends. Oh, that's a move there. Queen takes b3. This bishop pins this pawn. This queen on b3 threatens checkmate on b2. d5. What was wrong with queen takes b3? There's some knight d4, I guess, but queen d6? She's going in the wrong direction. She's actually trying to go queen e5. That's maybe not such a wrong direction. Oh, yeah, this queen now can slide back to square a2 to protect. 3 seconds for Vaishali. And, oh my gosh, it's just pure time trouble at this point. Rook takes b3 happens. And let's see, is she going to be calm under pressure here? Rook takes b3, rook takes b2 is a pretty devastating threat. This knight, this pawn on d5 hits the rook on e4, but there's rook to d1 with spins. Oh, she won on time, but that's a great move with the check here. So winning on time, that just barely got by there, but very well played by Mungsul Termunk there. And in the other matchup, we saw, wow, another win by Wen Pham there. Another win. So this bishop is on d3. So she's trying to play a slower approach here, trying to get winning chances for later. And Mungsul is proving to be a very tough player, a stubborn defender, and like timely attacks as well. All right, so Black has chosen this setup here where there's a lot of tension on d4, and Vaishali is just playing this quietly. Knight f1, knight g3, just to reroute this knight, try to move forward, because where is this knight supposed to go to? It can go to c4 and e3, but sort of the similar plan is trying to get it into the game. And d5 is very tempting. because it shuts down this bishop on b7. So I'd be looking at d5. And the one reason you wouldn't play d5 is in case you want to open up the board on the d file if you don't think you have enough winning chances strictly on the king side. So black actually says, I'm going to open things up. Now knight to g3 for sure. And I think after knight g3, d5 is going to be played. Or not yet. I'm looking at d5, and after e5, bring my knight into e4. So what's she gonna do here? I'm gonna keep an eye on the other game. The other one is in, just to pull that one up, it's in an ending. Oop. Sorry, it's in an ending here. And well, you need to win with the white pieces. It does seem like there are some chances, but we're ending. So we'll go back to the other game. Feels like there's much more life in the immediate position. I'll come back. I'll keep an eye on the other one. But here, this knight came to f5. And Hikaru was just saying this yesterday. If you can get a knight into f5, you're almost always happy about it. Because g6 not really going to be easy to play with the knight going into h6. These knights working together quite well. But now g6 seeming like more of a possibility with his bishop helping to protect the black king. And what now, though? Like, white needs to build on the position, but this pawn e4 requires constant defense with the knight and the bishop staring down. I want to play bishop b3, but I'm worried about just losing my pawn e4. So queen f3 is kind of standard, right? The way to push forward is bring your queen into the game, but I'm leaving my pieces a little bit loose, this bishop on c2 in particular. So I think you want to keep everything safe for now. I would take on e6 either now or in the near future. She plays bishop to b2. But Mungzul, we have her on camera still. She's trying to dig deep. She just needs a draw in this game to win the match. Keeping an eye on the other one. The other one's still looking... Wait, the other one actually... Isn't black up a couple pawns? So black was up a pawn when I first looked. I didn't even realize that. And then white pushed the pawn up. And then now... Okay, black still up one pawn. So it looks like this one is going to be decided in Wenfem's favor. What is happening here? Okay, so the bishop on b2, the bishop on c2 is trying to pressure black's king, but the knight on e6 is an amazing defender. It stops any kind of pawn push. Queen g5 played to trade the queens off. And I don't know if trading the queens off solves all of black's problems. Actually, I don't think it does. But I get it. And what next? So what should white do? You need to win, so you don't really feel like you want to trade queens, but I don't know. You have this f pawn, right? So I want to push this f pawn, and this pawn on d5 is weak. The bishop on b7 is terrible. We've seen this a lot today with this bishop stuck behind a wall of pawns. It's a very passive piece, but this bishop on f8 is now staring at b4. And h4 was the choice. So the knight can come back to e4 now. Takes first. On d4, the knight's come back to e6, I guess. That's a good decision. b4 is still under attack. Probably bishop d3. Wait. Knight takes e6. Rook takes e2 could have been played. It wasn't even... It was just the pre-move was going on. But I understand why. White is down in time. Black has just needs a draw odds essentially, and black just stole a pawn on b4. So it looks like Mungzul is going to take this one, and rook f4. Oh, well played here. So hitting f2 now, and a4. Actually, you can't protect f2. And once f2 falls, bishop takes f2 here. I guess rook takes f2. Just trading pieces makes sense as well. But rook has to go to h3. Now the sacrifice isn't getting you anywhere. h6, you have g6. Here, rook to d2. This pawn's hanging. Not that big a deal. Rook check. Rook takes a4. The rook can just do its damage, and now white is down a bishop for a rook and 2 pawns. Too much extra material here for black. But that's a good move, bishop e7, because if black gets greedy, there's bishop f6, and the king being on g8 is all of a sudden a problem. So just don't take on e5. Don't allow bishop to f6 so easily. King h8, perfectly fine. King f7, even better. Bring the king towards the center. Yeah, this is a good position. And so thinking still. So, well, wait. I have to go to the other game. What has happened here where all of a sudden white is going with his passed pawn? How? I thought that this one was going to be over in black's favor pretty easily, but now we have this pawn, and suddenly there are good chances for white to go. Can't go c6 because the rook pinned the pawn. So rook e5 check was probably a good move, just in general. But now c6, and the rook can't protect the pawn, so the king can't scoop up f2. I think we're going to get a tie break. c7. But this rook is going to take on f2 if your king goes in front of the pawn. But king e8, king e8, really good move. And now you have to figure this out. So king d8, check. Rook here, rook d4, rook d4. If she finds rook d4, she keeps the king stuck. To bring the rook back, I don't think she sees it, and she's in danger of repeating the position. King d6, where's the king going? To e5? And then rook e2 check. Oh gosh. Is she going to be able to make this happen? So king d6. It's hard to see, like, where did I repeat the moves? Was the rook on f7 earlier, or was the rook on g7? I don't even remember. The rook was on f7, so putting it back on f7, that was a big mistake. It's a draw by repetition. Ah! Oh, that's so painful. That's so painful. And back here, after rook c2, rook d4 was a strong move because this pawn needs to be captured. The rook can't capture an f2 because you get a queen. And the king can't capture an f2. Well, it can, but you take this pawn, and then you end up promoting. So it's hard to see this move rook to d4 because you want to keep your rook behind the pawn. But unfortunately, rook to d4 was a necessity, and you're keeping the black king stuck over here. The next move will be to promote, and to what you got. And actually, it's a good point. I see you in the chat, tab999. Rook takes f2 was a good option because after queen, then you have rook c2 check, and then once the king has to go protect the queen, you take here, and then you end up pushing your pawn, and the rook will have to sacrifice. So both sides missed chances, to be fair. It's good to show that, so it wasn't just that white missed a win and was completely win the whole time, but it is important to show that rook to d4, it's a really nice move to find, as if this rook were able to get, not to d3, but to d4 here, it keeps black's pieces totally tied down. So this is the results you see on screen. When Pham, she wins her matchup, and Mungsul Termunk, they both move on into the Women's Speed Chess Championship. So, on that note, my job here is done. Everybody, I hope you've enjoyed the second qualifier of the Women's Speed Chess Championship. I know I loved this format, 3 minutes plus 1 second increment. Tomorrow will be the next qualifier. It will start at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. That's 7 a.m. Pacific. If you're elsewhere, you'll have to figure out the time for yourself. Sorry about that. But it will be bullet. So it'll be 1 minute plus 1 second increment. All the games will be bullet. That means I will have to bring my quickest speaking voice humanly possible. I know I already speak quickly. I'll have to step up my game. But for now, congratulations to the 2 qualifiers. They played an amazing event, and I will see everybody soon. Remember, there will be PogChamps to watch and plenty more chess to come. So thank you so much, everybody. And I'm just trying to see what's on. Thank you. I really appreciate it. This is an event brought to you by both chess.com and FIDE. So it's a pleasure to commentate this official event. And, well, I'll see everybody soon. So take care. I'll be back tomorrow. And in the meantime, enjoy more chess.